Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole Faison. I'll be your trainer for today, and I'd like to welcome you to another EIV system training. This training is focusing on the updated EIV system 9.1.1 and as well as annual security awareness training for all of our PHAs that are using the EIV system, as well as those individuals who will be utilizing EIV information in paper and electronic form. So what I'd like to do is get into our agenda for today. We're going to start out with a brief segment on security awareness. Then we'll have a brief questions and answer sessions with respect to security awareness. Then we'll talk about what's new in EIV with the April 2010 release. And then we'll go into what is new in the upcoming release of EIV on Monday, September the 27th. And then we'll also focus on HUD EIV guidance that was issued during fiscal year 2010. That's going to help you to understand how to effectively implement the use of the EIV system in your day-to-day operations as mandated by the new HUD regulation. And then we'll also focus on two new forms that have come out by HUD, which is HUD Form 52675, as well as the 52676 forms, which focuses on the debts owed to PHAs and Terminations, notice to applicants and participants, as well as the new EIV access authorization form and user agreement. And then we'll also show you how to use the new debts owed to PHAs and Termination module. And then we'll end with a question and answer session with respect to what's new in EIV. For those of you that are tuning in today, please note that this is updated EIV system training, which is required by all EIV system users and handlers and viewers of EIV information. Completion of this training is required by April 29th, 2011. For those of you that are new EIV system users, the training session that is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is designed specifically for those individuals who need initial EIV system access. That training is going to be held tomorrow for new users and for those existing users who may want a refresher course on how EIV gets the data, how the information is brought into the system, and how to use the various functions of the EIV system. So today's training is focusing on updated EIV system training. So the questions and answers that will come about today should only be on the material that I am covering today, okay? So if you have questions with respect to the material that I'm presenting to you today, feel free to call in or email us your questions. Those questions will be presented to me for answering. However, in the event that your question does not get aired or does not make it into our queue, at the conclusion of this training session, you may send those email inquiries to PIH.RHIIP.TA@HUD.gov, and that's on the very last slide of the PowerPoint presentation that's in your packet or posted online at the HUD.gov /PIH Rental Assistance, Housing Assistance Programs, Technical Assistance webpage. So without further ado, let's get into security awareness so we can talk about how to safeguard EIV information. And my friends, many of you already know how to safeguard EIV. EIV is no different than information that you have in your tenant files with respect to social security numbers, pay stubs, birth certificates, and all those other personal identifying information. However, the department takes security awareness very seriously and expect all housing authorities, staff persons to participate in annual security awareness training so that you are aware how to safeguard EIV information as well as other personal identifying information that you're handling on a day-to-day basis. So we'll go over a brief overview of policies and procedures and controls that you should have in place for securing EIV information, as well as basically identifying staff who have access to sensitive information and making sure that they are aware of these procedures and making sure that they participate in security awareness training. And then also, PHAs should be aware of the Federal Privacy Act requirements. While the Federal Privacy Act does apply to all federal agencies, the department has put into place various policies and procedures that are based on the requirements under the Federal Privacy Act. And so we'll go through some of those as we talk about the EIV access authorization form later on. But let's get into the Privacy Act, and just so you can kind of have a background of what it is and what it means. And the Federal Privacy Act is nothing more than a statutory document or statutory provisions that requires HUD and PHAs to notify people what information we're collecting about them, how that information is being utilized, as well as letting them know that the information that you're requesting from them is going to be utilized for a specific purpose. And for our purpose, we're using that information for the intent to determine eligibility and level of assistance for HUD rental assistance programs. You're not using that information for anything other than that purpose. You also need to let your applicants and tenants know that this information is not going to be disclosed to any additional third parties or other entities who may request such information, because again, the information that you're collecting is for the purpose of determining eligibility and level of assistance for HUD rental assistance programs. And then also, your tenants and applicants also need to know that they have a right to see any information that you're collecting about them. And so if your client or your tenant was to ask for a copy of information that you have collected about them, you're required to provide them with the information that pertains to him or her. That is their right under the Federal Privacy Act. Also, we need to ensure that each housing authority, for every family that you are conducting either an initial reexamination, an annual reexamination, or an interim reexamination of family income and composition, that you have a HUD form 9886 form or equivalent consent form that meets the requirements under 24 CFR Part 5, Section 230. So you need to make sure that you have a current and valid consent form that is on file for each one of those households members as well as the adults, to make sure that that is the form that authorizes you to collect information about your families, okay? Now, please keep in mind the consent form, whether it's the HUD form 9886 or your equivalent PHA generated consent form, that form is not required for you to do the existing tenant search or the former tenant search within EIV. Keep in mind, your consent form is authorizing you to actually request income information about the families, so you do not need the consent form for doing the search for existing tenants or former tenants. And just keep in mind, EIV does allow for you to search and determine whether or not an applicant may already be receiving rental assistance in either the PIH rental housing assistance program or multifamily housing program. Your former tenant search allows you to check and see if your applicant may have already been in the program, left the program, unfortunately under adverse terms, and or owes a debt to another housing authority. And we're going to talk about the debts owed module later on. Also, all EIV users are required to acknowledge their understanding of the requirements of the Federal Privacy Act, as well as the various technical, administrative, and physical safeguards that must be employed to safeguard the EIV information. And that those requirements are outlined on the new HUD Form 52676, which each individual is required to sign. Again, all EIV system users, as well as users who won't access the system but will view or handle EIV information, they will need to ascertain that A, they have taken annual security awareness training, B, that they're aware that the information that they're accessing is sensitive information and must be safeguarded. So it's pretty straightforward. Okay, violations of the Federal Privacy Act. What happens if you should happen to violate the Federal Privacy Act? Any one of the provisions, whether it's, denying somebody from access to their record, or, oopsies, I had somebody's EIV report fall into the wrong hands. What could happen to you as a housing authority staff person? And so it's very important for you to understand that there are consequences if you do not employ effective administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. And those are listed on the screen here. And basically, an individual, your tenant, your client, your applicant, may take legal action against either HUD or PHA for the following actions: your refusal to grant access to EIV record upon request, improper or unauthorized disclosure of EIV information, and then failure to ensure security and confidentiality of the EIV information. And again, you all are doing this already, but I want to make sure that you all are aware and stay aware, because confidentiality and safeguarding personal identifying information is very key in the day-to-day activities that you do at the Housing Authority. And so you want to make sure that documents don't end up in the wrong hands. As we all know, identity theft is rampant. So we want to minimize the occurrences of information falling into the wrong hands. Civil remedies for violation of the Privacy Act. And this just basically outlines that any individual may sue HUD or the Housing Authority. If found liable, a court could basically award actual damages, but no less than $1,000, and the cost of the action as well as reasonable attorney fees. So it's pretty much straightforward. Knock on wood, I haven't heard of anybody violating the Federal Privacy Act or having someone's information fall into the wrong hands. So you guys are to be commended for doing a great job, so keep up the good work. Okay, so administrative safeguards. These are techniques that you should be employing to make sure that EIV is safeguarded. And these are very, very simplistic. Restrict access to the EIV system to only people who need to have access to EIV. Clearly, your maintenance staff person who is maintaining units or conducting inspections, they have no reason to access EIV information, so you wouldn't grant access to those individuals. You will only grant access to those individuals or authorize access to the EIV system by those individuals whose job requires them to do some type of administrative process associated with the annuals, the interims. It's not uncommon for you to have like a file clerk who does all the filing of everything, but again, a handler of EIV information or personal identifying information needs to make sure that they are aware of this administrative safeguards as well as physical safeguards, which we'll talk about in a minute. Also, again, this goes back to ensuring that your staff complete annual security awareness training. I can't emphasize that enough. It is very important that your staff do annual security awareness training. Most housing authorities have an in-house training facilitator. It is also acceptable for you to hire a third party, an industry expert, for doing security awareness training for your staff on site or off site, whatever is convenient for you. But again, the key is annual security awareness. Make sure everybody is doing it. And then last, if there should happen to be a breach or security breach, and what I mean by that is if by chance EIV falls into the wrong hands, or somebody left your agency and they took a bunch of EIV printouts, or you find out that somebody was accessing information they had no business accessing, you need to notify your local HUD office immediately, as well as me in HUD headquarters via the PIH-RHIIP.TA@HUD.gov email address, and I will basically work with you to mitigate that situation. And I want everybody to be cognizant of what you should be doing if you should happen to have a security breach. First and foremost, you need to notify the affected individuals. And you need to do that in writing, letting them know what happened. Now, I know sometimes we like to write a lot of letters and so forth and so forth. There's no need to say, "Dear Sally, our former staff person, Peggy Sue, left your EIV in her folder in her car underneath the seat." You don't need to get into the granular details, but what you need to do, and one of the things, if you ever receive a notice from like Bank of America or what's the other bank, they have all kinds of security breaches, and you get that letter in the mail that says, "Dear Nicole, this is to advise you that there may have been a security breach and your information may have fallen into the wrong hands," yada, 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 and they let you know what has happened and the right thing to do, provided, let's say someone's social security number was disclosed, full social security number. Now keep in mind, your EIV reports have the last 4 digits masked, but let's say hypothetically you had the income discrepancy report, which has the full social. If that report landed in somebody's hands, you need to be offering your client credit monitoring at your expense. That's a minimum, okay? That is the industry standard when there is a security breach. A, notify the individuals. B, offer them credit monitoring so that they can monitor and make sure that nobody's misusing their Social Security number. And we'll talk later on about identity theft later, but I just want to kind of share a few because most people are like, okay, well, what do I do if? And you can actually go out onto the website. If you surf the internet, there's a lot of information on how to handle security breaches, and they're industry standards. Okay, additional administrative safeguards. All of your EIV users, including the handlers and viewers, must complete the HUD form 52676, and you have to maintain that form in your files. Those forms are subject to inspection and audit. Now, we are pursuing the ability of converting that form to an electronic form within the EIV application, but until we can do that, we need to account for every single EIV system user, what roles they have, and who authorized that access. And as you know, that form is signed by the agency's executive director or supervisor or team lead, whoever the ED has designated to sign off on those forms. Those forms are to be maintained either paper file or electronic. Electronic files are great, not a problem. We just need to be able to access them if we should happen to come and do an audit. Now, technical safeguards. I can't emphasize this enough. Do not share your user ID and password that HUD has issued you. Okay? Now, I'm gonna let you know, and it's nobody in this room, but maybe somebody that's out there watching this webcast right now, you know someone who shared the user ID and password. Okay, and I do realize that sometimes it may take a little while for you to get your own assigned user ID from HUD's Real Estate Assessment Center. However, under no circumstances are you to share your password or your user ID. And this is how HUD will know that you're sharing your user ID, because some of you are just like totally oblivious to what you're asking when you write into HUD. Dear HUD, I'm trying to figure out why I can't access this report in EIV. The minute that we look your name up, if you have an assigned user ID, it's going to come up. Well, a lot of folks are writing in saying they can't access something, but they shouldn't be accessing because they don't have their own user ID. So that lets me know that they're using somebody's user ID. Now, for all you executive directors out there and in this room, stop bullying your staff. Do not use your position to obtain somebody's user ID and password, because this is happening too often. EDs are coming on board, and they are waiting for their user ID, and so they go, hey, Sally, I need your user ID and password so I can get into EIV. And, of course, Sally is going to say, well, you know, Nicole, I am not allowed to share my user ID and password. You know, I signed that user access authorization form, and it says specifically I cannot disclose. Then the ED says, well, I'm the ED, and I sign your paycheck, so you give me your user ID and password. Now, granted, most of you are going to be inclined to give your user ID and password because you want to get your paycheck next week. So this is a plea to all the EDs and people that are in supervisory roles awaiting your own user ID and password. Stop bullying your staff. Stop asking them to violate the rules and regulations, okay? It's not fair to put your staff in that position. It is not fair, and it's actually a violation of HUD policies and procedures. So we know that everybody wants to do the right thing. So please, Mr. Executive Director, please, Mrs. Executive Director, stop asking for other folks' user IDs. And my friends, I know what you're saying. You're like, well, I gave it to them, and I'm just going to change my password the next day so they can't get in. The damage is already done. Don't give your user ID and password. Now, most people, what they will do is they will contact their local HUD office and say, can you please help me? They're bullying me into giving my user ID and password. feel free to call your local HUD office or call me, email me. I'll help you, okay? You cannot share the user ID and password. I will tell your ED you cannot use somebody else's user ID and password, okay? Also, make sure that access to EIV information and systems are for official purposes only, okay? Now, we have a lot of information, and some towns are smaller than others, and everybody knows everybody, and so, you know, if your girlfriend down the street from you says, hey, don't you have access to that system? You know, my ex-boyfriend, Bobby, I really would love to know where he's working right now. You have to tell your friend, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that, okay? You are not to be utilizing EIV system for personal gain or personal business. It's for the official business of determining eligibility, level of assistance for HUD rental assistance, and identifying any potential issues related to the assistance. Nothing else, okay? And it's pretty straightforward. I know how some of you can be tempted, but don't fall for the okie doke, okay? Don't access the information for any other purposes, and you'll be just fine. Now, physical safeguards. Now, a lot of folks get really up in arms about physical safeguards because if you remember some of the previous EIV system trainings, we were very adamant about physical safeguards, and we still are adamant about physical safeguards. And what we mean by that is that EIV information has to be secure, okay? Now, one of the things that I need to share with you, and it's been a change of policy, is that EIV information must be destroyed within 3 years from the EOP date or end of participation date unless there's pending litigation, okay? Now, previously, EIV had to be destroyed every 2 years. We have renegotiated the provision with Health and Human Services, and we have that new contract that is actually going through the signature process in which EIV information may be retained for the duration of tenancy and for a period not to exceed 3 years from the end of participation date or once the pending litigation that was started prior to the EOP has come to a conclusion. Okay? Also, you need to ensure that you're maintaining the tenant files in a physically safe area. That means ensuring that the areas in which your tenant files are in are locked. Okay? If the area is not locked, then those files need to be in a locked file cabinet or room or some sort. And most people will say, well, gee, you want us to have Fort Knox. No, what we want you to do is make sure that anybody who's coming in and out of your office, if you have an area where people, the general public, can come into, you should not have personal identifying information readily available for somebody to put their hands on. So if you can't restrict an area, what you have to do is then make sure you're putting that information into locked file cabinets, locked storage rooms, locked cabinets. You should know who has a key to what doors, okay? When people leave, you need to collect those keys. Depending on your agency, some agencies, I know from my former agency, when folks left, we changed the locks, okay? But everybody can't change the locks every time you have staff turnover because some agencies have high turnover, but you have to account for the keys and make sure that you know who's got what and who has access to what doors and what file cabinets. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Any questions from the audience with respect to security awareness? It's pretty straightforward. Rana, you had a question. Could you step to the mic? No, you can't avoid the mic. We want to make sure our live folks who are viewing the webcast can hear the questions that are asked.
There are questions, but it's more like clarification. On the HUD form 9886, is it required to be signed by the live-in aid?
The live-in aid doesn't need to sign the 9886. We're not collecting any income information on live-in aids. The live-in aid income is not collected.
The clarification needed was because when you do pull up the income report, if there is a live-in aid as part of the household family, the income does come up.
We'll look into that. There should not be any data for live-in aides.
The live-in, yeah, that was the question, because the live-in, if they are working, the income does come up, so.
We'll look into it.
Okay. Do the board members of an agency, do they need to take EIV awareness training or sign anything?
Unless the board member is going to be doing annual reexaminations or doing any part of the administrative process in which EIV information would be available to them, they don't need to do EIV system training.
Okay.
And just so I can kind of emphasize, the EIV system training, the initial EIV system training is designed for system users, people who will physically utilize the system. The updated EIV system training, again, is updated training that we provide to reflect and go over changes to the system so that system users will know what's new and how to use those new functionalities effectively. Then we have annual security awareness training, which we tend to do maybe once a year here by HUD. But anybody who's accessing sensitive information, personal identifying information, should be taking annual security awareness training. So if your board members are looking at reports that have social security numbers or looking at personal identifying information, they need to be taking annual security awareness training.
Okay. So if I'm clear, if as a board member I have access to all, I am maybe the informal hearing officer for whatever reason they may be, I look at a family's application or any information which has got the social security number or an EIV income report, I should really beforehand should have taken the security awareness training to cover myself.
They need to take annual security awareness training. If they're accessing EIV reports and accessing the system, they need updated and initial EIV system training. And the training requirements are actually outlined on the HUD form 52675, which we're going to talk about in just a moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
One last question before me. The trainings which is offered by HUD, is it open for PHAs to just go onto the website and just take the training themselves?
The training is available via webcast, and actually the HUD headquarters sponsored training is a required training.
Okay.
And that's outlined in PIH Notice 2010-19, paragraph 22.
Thank you.
So this training is a required training for every EIV system user. So for every user that has access to the system, please note, when you log on to the system, there's a checkbox for you to check. And a lot of times, and I want to caution you, I've cautioned you in the past, read the checkbox that you're checking, because when you check the checkbox, you are certifying that I have completed annual security awareness training, I have completed initial EIV system training, and I will complete the updated EIV system training. And there's a slide in this PowerPoint presentation kind of ahead of ourselves, but this training must be completed by all PHAs by April 29th, 2011. Okay, so everybody's got a little over 6 months to complete the training, and again, we're going to get into training requirements in just a little bit. Okay, so great. Let's move on. See how that wasn't painful, was it? Security awareness. Everybody kind of. All you need to do when you think about security awareness, just think of yourself. If this is my social security number, would I want my social security number laying around for anybody to get their hands on? And everybody's going to say, no, I don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to have my social security number. So my thing is, I want you to get in the mindset of safeguarding information as if you would safeguard your own purse, your wallet, your car keys. It's the same concept. You're not going to go to the grocery store and leave your wallet up in the produce counter. No, because somebody's going to take it, and they're going to take all your money and your credit cards, and if you're still writing checks, they're going to take your checks. So just think of security awareness in the sense of protecting your clients, protecting your tenants, okay? All righty, so what's new in EIV as of April 19, 2010? Do keep in mind that I do understand that many of you did not have the ability to actually recognize what was new in EIV as of April 2010 because there were some snafus with the system with the migration from EIV to the Oracle environment. So we didn't do a webcast with the release, so we're going to go over what's new in EIV as of April 19, 2010. You all should be aware by now, because if you're on the PIH-RHIIP mailing list, you got the notice that let everybody know that we are now going from a quarterly user certification process to a semi-annual user certification process. And guess what, folks? The next certification period is coming up October 1st, okay? So October 1st, you will begin certifying your users who still need to continue to have access. You will certify users in October and in April. And those user certifications have to be completed the day before the end of the month. So for October, you have until October 30th, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to certify your users. If you do not certify your users at the stroke of midnight, it will be like Cinderella coming from the ball. The coach will turn into a pumpkin and fall to the ground. That means your EIV access will automatically be terminated at the stroke of midnight, and you will have to go through the process of getting your local field office and your agency's user administrator to get you back into the system. So avoid the automatic termination by having your users certified by April 30th. Also, what's new in EIV? You guys asked for it, you got it. You said, hey, I want to be able to pull EIV income reports by head of household's last name. Many of you didn't realize that it was there. Folks were saying, hey, Nicole, my batch income report says that I have 500 income reports, but when I get to the screen, it says 0, or it says 1, it says 3. Well, I'm going to show you the new change. But basically, you now have the ability to click on the alphabetical letter of the last name that you want to pull EIV income reports. So if you only handle the H's, guess what? You click on H and you get all the income reports for the head of household whose last name begins with H. Also, you now can do batch income reports with the optional, and I should have underlined this word on the PowerPoint presentation, optional certification page. Now, when we introduced the certification page back in April of 2009, I informed you then that that page is optional. Remember, a form that does not contain an OMB approval number and valid date is not required. It's optional. That certification page is now printable with your batch income reports. Many people use the certification page to have your clients document that you reviewed the EIV information with them and they are acknowledging either they agree or they dispute the EIV information. Again, it's not mandatory that you use that form. We created that form as a courtesy to housing authorities who wanted to utilize the form. Again, the form, the certification page is optional, okay? The new hires report, we've changed that because you said, hey, I don't want to keep seeing the same families on that report over and over and over again, because in the past, the report showed families who have been newly hired within the last 6 months. So we heard what you asked for, and we have actually modified the system in 2 ways. Right now, the report is defaulted to show families who have experienced new employment within the last 3 months. However, if the majority of the PHA says, HUD, we want you to change this report so it only shows the families who've been hired within the last 2 months or 1 month, we can do it with the click of a button. We don't have to wait for an EIV system release. So right now, the new hires report is defaulted to show families who have had an individual hired within the last 3 months. We're going to leave it defaulted at 3 months. You guys work with it. If the 3 months works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, the minute that someone requests for us to change it, then we will send out a message asking if you agree or you disagree. And if the majority agrees, then we will change it to 1 month or 2 months or whatever works best for the PHAs, okay? So please know that that's available. And also what's available is the new hires report is also available by head of household last name as well. So you can pull, if you only have, again, if you're only dealing with the H's and you only want to see who's been newly hired, whose last name begins with H, you click on H and you'll get those individuals only. Also, you all know I love the deceased tenants report, and you all said, Nicole, it would be really great if we could know our statistics for deceased single-member households, because we don't want to continue housing dead people, so we want to be able to zoom in on the deceased single-member households. And so what we've done, we've added your statistics for your deceased single-member households, the number and percentage within your agency, and then also what we've done, we've enhanced the search criteria for which you pull the report. Before, you just got all the household members who were deceased. If there was a household who was a single-member household, there was a red asterisk next to the deceased date. But the annoying thing was when you downloaded that report into Excel, the red asterisk did not go into the report. So you didn't know which ones were single-member households. So if you look at the very last bullet here, we now have the ability to create the report for either just single-member deceased households, multiple-member households with deceased individuals, or all deceased households. So for those of you that are really proactive on your deceased tenants report and you're zoning in on those deceased single members, use this criteria so that you can do the screening. And I want to commend the housing authorities. You guys are doing a fabulous job in getting rid of dead people in public housing and housing choice voucher programs. Okay? And what I mean by that is that when someone dies, what has traditionally happened is that the landlord typically may not tell you that poor Bob died. And so you continue to pay housing assistance payments until the landlord gets ready to tell you that Bob died, or you should happen to run into Bob's sister and she tells you that Bob died. Well, now you don't have to wait for those impromptus. You can now use the deceased tenants report. And of course, we're going to talk about deceased tenants in just a minute, because we're going to go over the deceased tenants report. What else is new? Just a cosmetic change with the income discrepancy report. The actual link to access that report is now relocated under the verification reports header. It used to be a standalone link on the left navigation panel of EIV. It's now part of the verification reports. So that's a cosmetic change. Also, for those of you, the debts owed to PHAs and termination module, that has been enhanced to include the end of participation date as a column, because you want to be able to sort by EOP date. We also have a repayment agreement indicator as well as a default on repayment indicator, which I will explain in just a bit. And I do apologize for the issues that EIV has experienced over the last 5 months or so. And unfortunately, because we spent a lot of time fixing the little bugs and quirks in EIV, we were not able to deploy, or we will not be able to deploy with the upcoming release that's going to go into code this weekend and available to you on Monday. We were not able to implement the host of changes to the debts owed module. Please get excited, because in April 2011, the debts owed module is going to be much, much better than what it is now. You'll be able to search by Social Security number to enter information. You'll be able to search by program type. You'll be able to do multiple deletions. There's a whole host of things that are coming. All the questions and comments that came in. Phil Dean, if you're out there, good Phil, out there, where's Phil? He's in Arizona, Colorado. Phil, I got your message, and I apologize for not getting back to you. Phil had some great comments on how to make the debts owed module bigger and better, and I've got those comments, and Phil, I'll be giving you a call soon I'm really bogged down with a lot of things, and I'm hitting the road again as soon as I finish these trainings on Friday. But we heard you, and my friends, please, when you're utilizing the EIV system, if something doesn't make sense or something doesn't work the way you would expect it to work, let's talk about it, because the system is for you. So you ask, we give, okay? So if you wanted to be able to do something, now please, if somebody, don't call in and don't send the email, when you going to get child support, when you going to get TANF, when you going to get pensions. We're working on it. I promise you, if the data is out there, I will get it, okay? But don't call and ask, because I've been telling you I'm working it, okay? In fact, I got a meeting next week for some additional resources. TANF, pensions, DOD. Can you get excited? But don't call in and ask, and don't email me, please. Did you get it yet? Now, I apologize for the delay in the distribution of the training materials for my webcast viewers out there. The training materials should be posted, and I did send the training materials about 9:30, 10 o'clock this morning. I apologize for the delay. My BlackBerry was just about on dead, and I had enough juice to say to the webmaster, post the materials. So hopefully they're posted and you got it. If you didn't get it, you'll get it, okay? I apologize. Also, what's new? Your debt's owed. Remember, before you could only search by head of household Social Security number. We have removed that limitation. So now if you search any Social Security number, whether it's the head of household, member number 1, member number 15, number 12, number 9, number 8, you will be able to pull up the debt or adverse record that is applicable to that household to which that member belongs. So that is a new enhancement, and I'm getting really excited. Shay, do you have my medication? I just love EIV, and I know you guys were disgruntled with EIV, and some of y'all, I'm going to be honest with you, some of y'all don't need to be in this line of work because you just don't like your job. And so that one person, that one lady, Sally, she's like, good, I'm glad EIV don't work right. I'm like, honey, the system is working. Because she wrote in and talked about she's not doing any more annual reexaminations till the September 27th release of EIV. Now, I don't know how many times I had to send you the message, my friends. Kim, keep it moving. You print what EIV gives you and keep it moving. If it says pending verification, print, and Kim, keep it moving. You cannot tell your client, oh, I'm so sorry, we can't do your re-exam today because EIV is saying you're pending verification. Negative. You will continue business as usual. Print what EIV gives you. If EIV gave you that HTTP error, print it, put it in the file. Kim, keep it moving, okay? Now, here is a screenshot showing you the access to batch income reports, and I know this screenshot is a little, but if you notice, even, I know, she's like, dang, I'm at the eye doctor exam. I can't read line 4. But if you notice there, A through Z and then all, the system automatically defaults to the letter A, okay? So like if you do your batch income reports, if you click on by reexamination month and then click on income reports, it's automatically going to default to A. And you'll see here that there's only three folks with the last name of A, but you're looking back at, remembering the report, and it said, hey, wait a minute, it says that I got 50. Why are there only 3? There's only 3 because it's only showing you those A's exactly, A's. So if you want to see all, you just go and click on all. And notice that the A is highlighted in red, so you know where you are in the alphabet because it is highlighted. So if you want all the reports, click on all. If you want L's, click on L. See how simple that is? You don't even have to read the user manual for that one, okay? The intent is to make EIV so simplistic that you don't have to read the manual. If you can click, you can get it, okay? Batch income reports with the certification page. Notice in the blue highlight, there's a new link where you double click to print the income reports with the certification page. That's if you want the certification page. If you don't want it, just print the income report. Again, certification page optional. All right, new hires report, again, showing you that you have the ability to pull the new hires report by last name. You just click on the alphabetical letter that you want. In this case, we clicked on all, so all is displayed. Your additional statistics on the deceased tenants report, just showing you within the blue box there, you have your number of single-member deceased households as well as participants, okay? Now, this is what your deceased tenants report should look like. This is my favorite report. It should be 00000. If your report does not have zeros going all the way across, that means you got a little work to do. Now, keep in mind, with the new release, okay, because do remember I did advise you that there were some nuances about EIV talking to the PIC system, and a lot of you said, hey, Nicole, my deceased tenants report says I have 5 people, but I'm looking right in the PIC system and I see my EOP 58. As long as you have an EOP 50058 that has been transmitted to PIC, your job is done, okay? All right, deceased tenants report, this is the new household type search criteria. Again, focus on the blue turquoise box there. You now have the ability to select the various 3 criteria. You have your all households, your single member household, and multiple member households to make life easier for you. This is a screenshot to show you your updated verification report list, to show you that the income discrepancy report link is now under the verification report. Again, cosmetic change. You probably didn't even notice it. All right, your debts owed, again, this screenshot's a little blurry, but if you'll notice the big yellow arrow there, that is your end of participation column. Your columns are sortable, so you can sort. Now, I do apologize. The list is only sortable for that page. We're working on some changes to that because, you know, it's too many Sallys out there. That disgruntled employee, she's just like, well, this is so cumbersome, I'm just not going to do it. Please do it, okay? But I'm going to tell you why you should do the deletion of the debts owed stuff, okay? We'll talk about that. Okay, here's your repayment agreement indicators, again, showing that you can check that the family who left the program has entered into a repayment agreement. Just check the box. See how simple that is? When you check the box, that tells the PHA community that they owe a debt and they have entered into a repayment agreement. Now, if they should happen to stop paying you, then guess what? You'll go back into the system and you'll check the default on repayment agreement, and that lets folks know that what? They quit paying. HUD spelled backwards, duh. See how simple the system is? If you can click, you can get it, okay? Click and get it. It's that simple. You don't even have to read the manual. It's self-explanatory. Okay. Also, here's your debts owed to PHA's enhanced SSN search capability. Notice that now it says enter Social Security number. Before it said enter HOH, or head of household Social Security number, and then you simply click on get information. So you're no longer limited to the head of household SSN search only. Okay, I'm so excited. What's new in EIV 9.1.1? I can't wait for the September 27, 2010 release, because then I can stop getting 5,000 emails about, why does it say pending verification? I've only told you 15 million times why it says pending verification. Please read the emails that I send to you. I know I send you a lot. I've sent you 74 in the last 6 months. However, May was the biggest month in which I sent you 26 messages, because that was when the system was really haywire and quirky. So I make it my business to keep you informed of what's going on, and so my messages are not intended to bog down your mailbox, but to inform you. And if you would read the content of the message, you would understand what is going on. So read before you ask a question, because the messages are very detailed and they outline what is going on. So nobody can say they didn't know what was going on. Now, if you're not on the PIH-RHIIP mailing list, I've only been begging you for the last year and a half, get on the list. If you get on the list, you'll be the first to get the greatest and latest first, okay? So, with this upcoming release, all of the bugs are going to be fixed in EIV. Hip, hip, hooray. Now, of course, Sally is going to be very upset with me. She's like, daggone it, they done fixed that system. Now I got to start doing these annuals again. Sally, you're supposed to be doing annuals anyway, with or without EIV. But come Monday, EIV is back up and running. Now, I do want to put a little caveat out there. Traditionally, as you all know, when we do a system deployment, we do not do the weekend summarization job the same weekend that we're deploying new code. So traditionally, what would happen is that EIV would go live on Monday, September 27th. The data that would be in the system would be as of this past weekend's summarization job. I have asked, and our IT team is working around the clock, due diligently, to do something that we have never done before, which is to do the weekend summarization job early so that you guys can get the data sooner rather than later. Also, what's going on is that traditionally, we wouldn't upload or update all of the Social Security and the National Directive New Hires data until after, typically we wouldn't do that until November. I have asked for all data to be totally refreshed, redone. So we have our files scheduled to go over to SSA, and actually they're being processed now. And by October 10th, put this down, knock on wood, October 10th is the date that every single individual who is in EIV should be fully updated. October 10th. Okay? So I am going to let you all know, for those of you that are out there watching and those here in the audience, please do not send a message regarding the pending verification message between now and October 10th, okay? Because we are in the process of converting those statuses from pending verification. And keep in mind, remember, pending verification means that HUD is doing something. There's nothing for you, the PHA, to do. We are updating the data, okay? So keep doing your annuals, keep doing your interims. If the system says pending verification, you will continue. Print the report, and Kim, keep it moving, okay? Now, also new in EIV, or actually not new in EIV, but new in WAS, okay, is the fact that there is a new alert in WAS. When you log on, WAS will let you know when you need to log in again to avoid being deactivated, okay? Because a lot of folks, you forget when you logged in last, and some of you all don't access HUD secure systems every month. Some of you may access the system every 2 months, every other week. Some of you go beyond 90 days, and then you're like, wait a minute, why can't I get in? Because you have been deactivated. The system automatically deactivates your access if you have not logged in within the last, I believe it's 90 days. So now, when you log into the WAS, there will be an alert letting you know when your automatic deactivation will occur if you do not log in by that date, okay? Also, what's new in EIV? Now, I told you this release of EIV was dedicated to fixing all of the bugs in the system. There is one new functionality that you all will immediately recognize when you log into the system. Whether you log into the system September 27th, 28th, 29th, the next time you log into EIV after this past weekend, after September 26th, you will be prompted with an EIV security awareness questionnaire, okay? And I'm going to show you what it looks like. Now, this is the alert, and you can't really read it, but I put in white text down here at the bottom. WAS will now alert you that your user ID will be automatically deactivated if you don't log in before November 1st, 2010. Please ensure that you log in before this date to avoid deactivation. So it'll tell you what date. So that way you can, and this does it every single time you log on to the secure system. That way you will know, wait a minute, let me put this on my calendar. Whatever you do, you got the little wall calendar, get the red marker and put HUD Secure Systems or WAS. Make sure that you know that you need to log in by that date to avoid the automatic deactivation. Okay, the new EIV security awareness testing. Again, EIV is going to prompt you, and it's only prompting external users, which PHAs, you are all external users. HUD staff users will not be prompted with this because HUD has its own security awareness component that we have to engage in once a year. The page contains a security awareness questionnaire with 10 simple questions. And if you have done your annual security awareness training, or you have, an understanding of what you should be doing to safeguard the information, you will be very fine with this questionnaire, okay? And it's basically making sure that you understand how to safeguard the EIV data. You will be permitted to access EIV once you have successfully answered 9 out of 10 questions, okay? And you will be prompted once a year to confirm your security awareness, okay? Once a year. It takes all about maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And if you'll notice here on the screen, there's 10 questions, and this just shows a highlight of 2. There's a mix of true and false and some questions where you just pick the correct response, okay? And then if you have successfully answered the questions, you'll notice here on the screen the little green, congratulations! You have successfully completed the security awareness questionnaire, and the gates of EIV will open. However, if you answer 1 or more questions incorrectly, red light, stop sign, will let you know you must successfully complete the questionnaire in order to access the EIV system. The gates are closed. They will not open until you answer successfully, okay? Now, if you happen to start the questionnaire but you don't finish and you try to submit your questionnaire without finishing, the EIV system will let you know, please answer all questions so you can proceed, okay? Very simplistic. Okay, now let's get into HUD's EIV guidance that has been published in fiscal year 2010. And keep in mind, all the guidance that's come out this year is geared towards the mandated and effective use of the EIV system. The first notice being PIH Notice 2010-19, which is administrative guidance on effective use of the EIV system. And this notice was published on May 17th of this year. It establishes one of my favorites, the verification hierarchy. And if you remember, the verification hierarchy was introduced in 2004, but I get really, really excited because the verification hierarchy has definitions that follow on the various verification techniques, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. I'm getting so excited. Okay. And then this notice also specifies required file documentation to demonstrate your agency's compliance with the mandated use of EIV. The notice also outlines for you how to use EIV to reduce administrative and subsidy payment errors. It also will show you how to use the EIV income report as a third-party source to verify tenant employment and income information, as well as your favorite, establishing tenant repayment agreements if necessary. Also, this notice outlines record retention requirements, which we've previously discussed, but we'll go over it again. Also, EIV record disclosure policy. We get a lot of questions on that, so this notice outlines some of that, and we'll discuss during this segment. And then here's the big one. How to correct incorrect EIV information, and we'll discuss that in just a moment. And then penalties for non-compliance with HUD's requirement that housing authorities utilize the EIV system. And I already know by looking at the report, no one is going to be penalized for not utilizing EIV, well, maybe except for that agency that Sally works for. So, Sally, you need to start using EIV, because if you don't use EIV, you could be subjecting your agency to penalties for non-compliance. So make sure your staff are utilizing the EIV system. This notice also outlines the training requirements, and, you know, as Rana mentioned earlier, there's some confusion as to what training are staff supposed to take, and we'll go over that, although we've talked about it, but it's outlined in this PowerPoint presentation. Now I'm really getting excited, because this is the verification hierarchy, levels 6 through 1, 6 being the highest. Upfront income verification via the EIV system is the number one or the highest level of verification technique available. Level 5 focuses on upfront income verification with non-EIV systems like the work number by the Talix Corporation, or relying on information that comes from an automated system. Level 4 is written third-party verification. Written third-party verification, there's a new definition out there that's in this notice, which we're going to go over momentarily. And then level 3 is what we call written third-party verification form, which is that traditional third-party verification that we, the PHA communities, are so much acclimated with and trying to get away from, because the likelihood of information being reported on there, we really can't validate that stuff. Not to mention, a lot of folks just don't send those forms back to the housing authority. So we're going to talk about that. And then level 2 being your oral third-party verification, and last level, tenant declaration, which is used as a last resort when other verification techniques are not successful. And then please note that this verification hierarchy and verification techniques apply to both applicants and tenants, not just existing program participants. Now, are you ready for the new definition of third-party verification? Are you ready? I'm so excited. Original or authentic document generated by a third party, dated within the last 60 days of re-exam effective date or PHA request date, documents in the possession of the tenant. Can you get excited about that? Because guess what, my friends? Those pay stubs, those bank statements, those letters from the employer, just because they're in the possession of your tenant doesn't make them bad, taboo, as we've been trained over the years. Those documents originated from a third party. They just so happen to be in the hands of your client. So I'm going to show you in just a moment how to streamline the income verification process. And so for those of you that have been following along EIV since its inception in 2005, I told you that this was coming. We were going to streamline the verification process so that you wouldn't have to waste a whole lot of time chasing after paper. Okay? Now, use of EIV income report as third-party verification. EIV equals UIV, UIV equals EIV. That's your new algebraic equation. Memorize it. So basically, upfront income verification is EIV, and guess what? Those tenant-provided documents that generated from a third-party source, those are third-party verification. So now we have to deprogram our minds that those documents are taboo, because for many, many years, Nicole, you cannot use that. You better go on and fill that form out and fax it over to the employer and get that form. No longer will, and I'm going to show you today how to minimize having to rely on that third party sending you a form back, or not sending it back, and maybe your client has intercepted the form and filled it out themselves to their benefit. We all know that it happens. Some of you are occupancy specialists, housing managers, voucher specialists, but some of you all have titles beyond your official title. Handwriting expert, handwriting analyst, investigator, fraud buster, counselor, psychiatrist, financial advisor. So I'm going to show you today how to really incorporate EIV so you can be a jack of all trades. All right, so please notice on the next bullet, Do not use EIV wage information, unemployment information to do income calculations. Notice in the bold, it's too old. Now, please don't send me an email message. Nicole, can you make the data more current? No, I cannot. And I've explained this to you, and I'll go over it again tomorrow in the training. The wage data comes in on a quarterly basis in accordance with the schedule established by the federal government, which is 4 months from the end of the quarter end date. I can't do anything about that, okay? So I'm sorry. Don't ask it, because the answer is no, and it's no not because I want it to be no. It's no because HUD has no control over it, okay? So do not use the EIV data, particularly wages and unemployment. However, for your Social Security benefits, as long as your client agrees with the EIV amount, and EIV updates Social Security every 3 months, and we know there's not too many changes to Social Security benefits. So as long as the EIV is consistent with what your tenant is reporting, yes, you can use EIV for Social Security benefit verification only, okay? Use, and I got to emphasize this, use current income documentations to do your income calculations for that upcoming re-exam. Right now we're in the month of September, so most of you are probably working on December, January re-exams. That means the documents, when we say current, and current is defined in this notice as documents dated within the last 60 days of you processing the re-exam, or 60 days prior to the effective date of the re-exam, or 60 days within the date that you requested your client to bring you in documentation. So if you request documents today from your client, it is September 23rd, you don't want to see documents dating back before July 23rd, okay? However, do keep in mind, the HUD guidance says for pay stubs, we need 2 current and consecutive. That's the minimum, 2 current and consecutive. Now, if your agency requires 50 pay stubs, I mean, that's your prerogative. But we need to see 2 current pay stubs that are utilized in the calculation of the upcoming interim or re-exam, okay? 2 current and consecutive. Why consecutive pay stubs? Why consecutive? Why? Right, one check might have been greater or less, and some clients, they already know that they have to bring in pay stubs to you, so they're like, look, let me go through my shoebox here. Let me get the 2 lowest ones. That's fine. You can give me the 2 lowest ones, because as long as it's a current pay stub, I'm going to take your year-to-date earnings, and I'm going to divide by the number of times you've been paid year-to-date and back into the number. So, you know, give me that one that's $100 and $50. I know my year-to-date say this, but they just going to take 150 and divide by 2 and come up with 75 and multiply that by 26. Yeah, but we need 2 current and consecutive. And if you watch the training in January 28th and look at those case studies, you may want to revisit those case studies, because I showed you, again, it doesn't matter how you do the calculation, whether you use the year-to-date or you do the mathematical average of the sum of all the pay stubs you collected, as long as you do it uniformly and consistently. Now, you can't say, well, you know, this one, I'm going to do it different. Now, you do that, you'll find yourself facing some fair housing discrimination, so don't do it. Be uniform and consistent on how you do your calculations, and please educate your clients on how you're doing that. The key to avoiding all the little snafus with your clients is educating the tenant on what you do, how you do it, and how it's impacted, okay? Also, please follow the HUD guidance. The guidance in your handouts in this live studio audience, PIH Notice 2010-19 is in your packet. For those of you that are viewing via webcast, it's posted on the PIH Notice page. It's also on the webcast page, as well as the Training and Technical Assistance page. Now, this is real simple. How does HUD know that you utilize the EIV system? Well, we're going to know because you're going to do this for us. You're going to maintain documentation that you utilize the EIV system for each interim and annual reexamination. Now, focus here on annual reexams. When you go to do an annual reexam, you're going to pull the complete income report for the family. You're going to maintain it in the tenant file with the 50058 and the supporting documentation. Again, paper file or electronic file, it doesn't matter as long as it's accessible for audit-related purposes. And what we will expect to see, your 5.8, your EIV report, and those written third-party verifications, those pay stubs, bank statements, whatever you used, because basically EIV is being supplemented with tenant-provided documentations, which are now classified as written third-party verification as long as those documents originated from a third-party source. For your interim re-exams, very simplistic. Again, you're going to print the ICN page if there's no income discrepancy, and you can easily see if there's an income discrepancy by clicking on the income discrepancy tab for the family, and if it's nothing there, then just print the ICN page. If there is an income discrepancy, you're required to print the complete EIV income report, and of course, if there's a discrepancy, you should be having a conversation with your client, okay? And so again, you'll be maintaining that, either the ICN page or the EIV income report in these categories that we have outlined for you. Now, for your newly admitted families, please focus on this. Within 120 days of your PIC submission date for each new admission and historical adjustment transaction, you are required to maintain in the file, you basically have to go into EIV, review, and print the income report for the household. If there is a discrepancy between what was reported at the time of admission and now, then you will rectify that with the client within 60 days of the EIV report date. Please keep in mind that for new admissions, EIV is going to be pulling data for income from the last 2 years. What you need to be making sure is that at the time of admission, if there's an employer or there's a Social Security benefit or unemployment that has showing up, you need to make sure that you're aware of it and it's been reflected in the income determination. If everything is peachy keen, not a problem. Put it in the file and keep it moving. Now, I do want to let you know, and this keeps coming up, people are finding that families have not reported income, and this is why it's important to run EIV at the time after they've been admitted into the program, because it's easier to fix any problems up front than to wait 8 or 9 months down the road to do the first annual re-exam. Okay, it's easier to pay $100 versus $1,200 retro. So one of the things that we have planned for the April 2011 release of EIV is that you will be able to pull income reports by these specific categories. So like right now, if you have to basically make a list of all your new admissions and historical adjustments, or, you know, manipulate and get a report out of PIC or whatever, now you'll be able, in April, be able to go into EIV and say, give me all the income reports for all new admissions, or give me all the income reports for historical adjustments. Give me all the EIV reports for portability move-in. That feature will be available to you in April 2011 to, again, we're keeping it so rad, man, reducing administrative burden, okay? So gnarly. Okay. Here, I put this in, because I don't think I've done this in any of previous trainings. I put a sample page of the ICN page. Just so you know, the ICN page stands for Individual Control Number. It is a unique system-generated number. Now, I'm only going to make mention of this because in my travels and reviewing PHA files, and I don't want to call anybody out in our room, but we do have some folks here in the room that are part of HUD's staff that actually goes out on site and does review at housing authorities, and we are trained to know what falsified documents look like. Now, I'm not going to say which agency it was, but we were actually on site at housing authority, and they were like, Nicole, how come this ICN number don't look like these other ICN numbers? I'm like, because they're forged. They made them up. Don't make up numbers, my friend, okay? Just print what the system gives you and keep it moving, okay? The numbers there in that box is a system-generated number. You can't make up an ICN number, okay? Now, some of you out there, they're mathematicians, and maybe you have a son or daughter that's getting ready to prepare for the SAT test, and you're like, look, can you look at the characteristics of the numbers in this ICN number and figure out what it contains? Somebody's going to figure it out, what it really means, but I'm just telling you, don't make up any numbers because we know what the system is generating, okay? All right, let's keep it moving. Required monitoring of EIV reports. Again, EIV is designed to help share information with you that you might not otherwise be aware of. Now, granted, EIV initially started out as a system designed to identify families who may not have reported complete and accurate income information, but we have expanded the system to cover a variety of areas that could be problematic and affect the level of assistance or the HAP payment that's made on behalf of a family or the tenant's rent contribution. So HUD needs to ensure that you are taking advantage of all of the various functionality that's available in the EIV system to reduce or eliminate these types of errors. And so you'll be required to monitor certain EIV reports, and the operative word is monitor. Monitor the reports on a monthly or quarterly basis and follow up with any identified potential problems. Because I assure you, if you don't follow up with the hits that are coming up on the report, HUD will. Okay, so please make sure, and again, if you're utilizing EIV's income report in your day-to-day operation, you never really have to look at any of these standalone reports because remember, anytime you see red on an EIV income report, that means you're having a conversation with Sally, okay? Now, Sally, she doesn't like to talk, during re-exams, and I was that way, too, because I was intimidated by some of my clients because, I think I told you this before, but I was very quiet about re-exams with my clients because when I would tell them that their rent was going from 110 to 150, some of them would actually, what you mean it's going to 150? You done did it wrong, and me and you, Miss Faison, after work. Like, I'm walking to my car. So I was in fear of, my body, so I resorted to not verbalizing the increases, and so I would just say, okay, Miss Jones, here's the paperwork, and I would point to the old rent and the new rent. Sign here, please. But I then realized that I have to do my job, and I have to communicate with my clients, and I have to let them know when there's a problem. So, Sally, you're going to have to start talking to your clients because EIV you're going to see a whole lot of red, and when you see red, that means you're having a conversation. And that conversation might not be a great conversation, but you have to have it anyway, okay? Just think of it just like you got to go home and tell your little son or daughter they can't go on a school trip next week because they didn't do what they're supposed to do. Same thing, you don't really want to have a conversation with little Johnny, but you got to have it. So, Sally, you got to have conversation with your clients, okay? So check it out. Monitoring of the EIV reports, monthly basis, very simplistic. Monthly, check out the deceased tenants report, and actually you're required to monitor, okay? Now, people have asked me, Nicole, am I required to print out the report, and am I required to do this and do that? The HUD guidance says you're required to monitor your report and take corrective action. If you're doing what you're supposed to do, if you've got 100 dead people on your deceased tenants report today, and next month the same 100 people are on there, most likely you haven't taken any action. Now, we're not going to really look month to month, but if I see those same 100 people on there in September 2010, and they're still on there February 2011, my friends, you and I are going to be having a conversation that I don't want to have with you, okay? So monitor your deceased tenants report, monitor your identity verification report monthly. Your identity verification report is going to identify those individuals who have failed the SSA screening. That means bad socials, last name doesn't match, date of birth is out of whack. Tomorrow, we're going to talk in detail about all these various reports. This is not the arena to talk about these reports because you guys are experts. You are trained EIV. But if you need a refresher, tomorrow's training is for you, okay? All right. Quarterly monitoring of your EIV reports. The income discrepancy report. There's no point, and I'm going to tell you right now, my friends, there's no point in monitoring any of these reports on this slide 53 more than quarterly. It's overkill. Some of y'all got your staff doing all kinds of crazy stuff and wasting time. Like you don't have enough to do already. Don't waste your time running the income discrepancy report every month. Because the wage data changes how often? Quarterly. If they were discrepant last week, they're going to be discrepant next week. The data hasn't changed. The only way the income discrepancy report is going to change is if you've resolved the income discrepancy and you've submitted a new 5A. But again, we're going to talk in detail tomorrow about the income discrepancy report. Do not call in asking any questions about any of these reports. This is not the arena. That's tomorrow's session. Your new hires report, quarterly monitoring, but notice the caveat. It is not necessary for you to monitor the new hires report if your agency does not have an interim increase policy in which you actually change the rent contribution by the family. Now, can I make a suggestion? And I'm only making this suggestion as a former PHA staff person and actually as a, I can really say former HUD employee, because, you know, right now I'm in the process of getting my TV show, Housing Fraud Busters. So it may come a time when I'm not standing here any longer, and when I'm no longer standing, that's because I have made it big on true reality TV. And I will be reaching out to you because I would like to put the camera in your housing authority for my show. So I know y'all laughing, but guess what? 10 years ago, I dreamed EIV. And EIV, they were like, oh, girl, you so crazy. That's what they were telling me. You so crazy. Well, here's EIV. So guess what? It might take me a few years, but I'm getting my reality TV show. And so y'all watch Operation Repo? I love that lady. Did you watch it the other night? Our show's going to be bigger and better. Housing Fraud Busters. And I'm working with my HUD OIG. And, you know, OIG, if y'all watching, you know, I just want to ride in the back of the car, you know, when y'all go to kick the door. But your new hires report, if you're not changing rent contributions in between annual re-exams, it's a waste of time. But why do you all have policies where you got to file documentation and get documents of a change in income in between interims and you're not changing the rent? That is the most administratively burdensome policy that's on the book. She's laughing because she's like, yeah, they make us do that at our housing authority. It's a waste of time. Because guess what? When they come in for their next annual re-exam, you're already going to have the new hire information on the family in EIV. And so stop making up these policies that are no nonsense, because it serves no purpose other than to irritate Sally. She already mad. She don't want to be there in the first place, and I got to document all this stuff, and I'm not even changing the rent. Sally's looking for a new job. She just don't know what it is that she wants to do. I know, Sally, I got a place for you on my show if you want to come join me. Income discrepancy resolution outlined in the notice, 24 CFR Part 5, Section 236. Most of you are not familiar with this regulation, been on the books for many, many years, but let's keep it real, my friends. Income discrepancy resolution is a very simplistic process. You don't need a reg to tell you to do it, because you already know if your tenant comes in today and says, you know, I need my rent reduced, Ms. Faison, because I'm unemployed. You're unemployed? Well, last year when you came in to do your annual, you told me that your only money you have coming in is from your mom, $100 a month, monetary contribution. So if you're unemployed and you draw in unemployment, that means you were working. So we're going to have a conversation about what you didn't report, when you started, when you stopped, and then I got to go back and redetermine what you should have been paying had you reported the income. So the income discrepancy resolution process is nothing more than comparing tenant reported information with the EIV reported information, identifying any unreported income or underreported income. Now, some of you will question, why do I have to do EIV during interim re-exams? Because something might have changed that's not being disclosed to you. Mary may have told you about the one job. She's coming in to tell you she lost that job that you know about. But she didn't tell you that she had a little side job at the Piggly Wiggly as a cashier working on the weekends. If you didn't pull EIV, you would never know about it unless Saturday morning when you're running your errands and you're at the Piggly Wiggly and you go to check out and you're putting your groceries up on the belt. Oh, Miss Faison, I was going to tell you about that job. And my former HABC family out there, you know I used to work at Gilmore Homes, and I found many of my clients working at the Lexington Market. I would go to Parks Chicken to get my chicken box with, you know, Western fries, and by golly, there was my tenant working behind the chicken counter. Miss Faison, you know I was going to come in there and tell you about this job. I just hadn't gotten around to it. Selective amnesia, you know, happens to the best of us. But of course, when there's a discrepancy, you're going to have to afford the client an opportunity to present you with evidence. They may, Miss Faison, yep, you got me. I do work here at the Parks Chicken. I'll be in on Tuesdays and Thursdays for walk-in to give you my pay stubs. So the notion is to request documentation from the tenant to help resolve the discrepancies and do your retro calculations and your new calculations going forward, okay? If your tenant is unable to provide you with documentation, then you would have to request your traditional third-party verification, okay? If your client can come in and give you all the documentation you need and it's acceptable, there's no need for me to go and say, hey, you know, Parks Chicken, I need this fax over this. Well, they don't have fax machines over at Lexington Market, at least not at Parks Chicken, because you know it's a big market. But you get what I'm saying. In that instance, I didn't have to go and contact the employer because my client was forthcoming, gave me all the information that I needed to do my retro and my calculation going forward. In the event that they can't, you would pursue your traditional third-party verification and then work your way down the verification hierarchy once, you know, depending on what was successful and what was not. And again, please notice the last bullet. Your tenant must be provided an opportunity to contest the PHA's determination. Now, keep in mind, a lot of times people say, well, I want to file a grievance. Well, you can't grieve the actual income determination process, but what you can grieve is maybe they're saying you did something wrong, you calculated incorrectly. This is why it's very important that you walk your client through the process of how these determinations are made so that they understand and there are no surprises. One of the things I also encourage you to do is, if you haven't done so already, get with your local legal aid folks, educate them on your income discrepancy resolution process and retro rent collection efforts and calculations, because it will go a whole lot smoother. I did this in Baltimore, and it was a great experience because then you didn't have to go into court battling with legal aid because, in essence, the family made an error. They did not comply with the program requirements, and so when they don't report, they owe you money, and they have to pay it back. So they must be afforded an opportunity to contest your determination. And then you also, before you do take any type of adverse action, whether you're terminating or reducing or denying assistance, you must give the client 30-day notice. That is a requirement in the Federal Privacy Act of Title V, United States Code 552A as amended. But it's also written in the HUD regulations as well. 30-day notice, which is standard. And everybody's doing that. Oh, this is another one of my favorite slides, or topics, so to speak. Rejection of tenant-provided documents. A lot of times, PHA staff feel like you have to accept documents that were presented to you. No, you don't. If you should happen to look at documentation and you just don't get that warm and fuzzy feeling about it, or if you're like Judge Judy and the hairs stand on the back of your neck and Judge Judy says, hey, this doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense to me, it's not right. You're fibbing. I love Judge Judy. Do you think maybe I could get Judge Judy to be on our next EIV webcast? I would love to do that. Maybe we can get a cameo appearance by Judge Judy. I love her. I got it. I should have a court show, and I will be the hearing officer of your repayment agreements and retros. Oh, that's a good one. See, see this brainstorming synergy going on here in the audience? Anyway, you can reject documentation for only the following HUD-approved reasons, and these are very simplistic. The document is not an original. The document has been altered, mutilated, not legible, or the document appears to be forged. Okay? So these are the three categories in which you may reject documentation. Now, the ultimate tenant repayment agreements. As we mentioned, there are some instances where your families are going to have to repay some money to you. Tenants are required. And notice the operative word in the sentence, and I probably should have put this in bold. Required means they must. They must reimburse you for the monies that was paid in error. So if the tenant's contribution was $200 and it really should have been $500, they owe you $300 a month for every month that payment was made in error. It's not an option for them to not repay you the money, okay? Keep in mind, rent calculations are based on income. Now, with the exception of the public housing program where the family has opted for flat rent, pretty much everybody's on an income-based rent. Remember, the statute says family's going to pay the greater of 30% of adjusted gross income, 10% of annual income, the minimum rent, welfare rent, whichever is greater. So in instances where the family hadn't reported income, most likely they're going to owe you some retroactive rent, and you cannot say, oh, well, you know, poor Betty, she didn't mean any harm by it. We're just going to let that go. We're going to sweep it under the rug. Okay, that's between me and you, all right? Can't do that. Negative. No. The statute requires them to pay rent based on income, okay? So you have to do a repayment agreement. The repayment agreement must be in writing, signed by the head of household as well as the PHA staff person. It should be dated and signed, okay? These are tenant repayment agreement standards, which are outlined in the HUD PIH Notice 2010-19, so because I know people are like, well, where in the regulations does it say I have to do this? Well, in accordance with 24 CFR Part 5, Section 233, Paragraph B, which is a new HUD regulation, it gives HUD the regulatory authority to prescribe how to use EIV and implement administrative guidance. And the regulations is written in a way so that administrative guidance come in the form of public issued notices, which the PIH Notice 2010-19 is. And again, that affords the department the flexibility to get your feedback on these provisions and modify where necessary. Now, most housing authorities, I haven't found one yet that's going to say, well, shoot, if somebody owe me money, it's no biggie. We can afford it. You know, y'all need every penny you can get your hands on. So keep it moving and collect up, okay? So also, please note that you're required to determine the retroactive rent amount as far back as the file documentation will allow you to do so. So if you found out that Mary had been working for the last 10 years and you got 10 years worth of 5/8 and supporting documentation, guess what? You get to do a 10-year retro calculation. Those are fun. Now, some of you all will just say, you know what? You didn't report income for 10 years. Hasta la vista, baby. You're out of here. See ya. Hasta la vista. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. Now, of course, you don't say that to your tenant now. Don't you just, think it, because you will be reprimanded by your supervisor, and plus, you got that performance evaluation. It's got that customer service component on it. Don't say stuff like that to your client, okay? This is just comedy here. Keep you awake, okay? If they hadn't reported income for the last 10 years, and all you had in your file folder was documentation for 3 years, how far can you go back? 3. Don't try going back beyond periods of time that you don't have supporting documentation, because if you end up in court, you will lose every time, without a shadow of a doubt. I would gamble my paycheck on it. Okay, PHAs have the discretion to establish your thresholds and policies for repayment agreements. Please understand there's a provision in the notice that makes mention about repayment agreements shouldn't exceed 40% of the family's adjusted gross income. The operative word in the sentence is should. That means this is just a recommendation, okay? It's a recommendation, but you, the PHA, have the discretion. HUD does not dictate what policies or thresholds you have in place. All we're asking is that these repayment agreements be follow the outline that we have provided here, written, signed and dated by the head of household and the PHA staff person. And we do have some provisions at a minimum that your repayment agreement should have. First one being reference to the paragraph in the public housing lease or the Section 8 information packet whereby the tenant is in non-compliance and may be subject to termination of tenancy or assistance or both. Because basically, the family needs to be informed that in accordance with your lease or in accordance with the Section 8 information packet that you were given with respect to tenant obligations, yada, 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 you are non-compliant. So that's number one. Number two, the monthly retroactive rent repayment amount is in addition to the regularly scheduled amount, okay? So here's the deal. Your current rent contribution is $200, but you're paying us an extra $100 towards this retro. Now, how you do it on your books, that's up to you, but you need to be able to, kind of keep track of what's going on with these repayment agreements. The terms of the agreement may be renegotiated in the event that there's an increase or decrease in the family's income. Again, that's a courtesy to both sides of the parties. Now, clearly, if you have entered into a repayment agreement with Mary for $5 a month, and she hit the lottery, or she got a job where she's doubled her salary, she needs to step it up. $5 a month is not going to cut it, and you should have the ability to renegotiate the terms of that agreement without having to go through a whole bunch of hoops. So having a provision in your agreement that it can be renegotiated, and that's something, if they're on a repayment agreement for a year or 2 years and you're doing an annual reexamination and you notice, oh, by golly, you've had a substantial increase in your income. You can afford to pay a little bit more, so we're going to readjust this. So that is a provision that is required to be in your agreement. This is a clause that I had in every single repayment agreement when I was at the housing authorities, and you are now required to have this, and this is a very effective clause. Letting your client know late payments, missed payments constitute a default of the repayment agreement, and a default of the repayment agreement means that you have the ability to terminate assistance or tenancy. So people need to understand this is a serious thing when you have not reported the income, and you have to repay this money. And you have to understand, in order to stay, you must pay. Stay, pay. How simple is that? Pay, you can stay. No pay, you go. Okay. Repayment options, very simplistic. Lump sum payment, monthly installment, or a combination of a lump sum and monthly installments. And again, HUD does not dictate how you collect this money. At my housing authority, I was a little aggressive, and Mrs. Burton would say, gee, Nicole, you didn't even really offer them much of a repayment. They're like, well, Ms. Faison, how much can I pay? I was like, I'll take 95% down and 5% to be repaid within 3 months. I'm like, you got a new car sitting out at the curb. You can afford that. You can afford to repay the housing authority their money. Right? Pay me when you get your refund check in February. Girl, you know I'm getting my rapid refund. And need to go all to the housing authority. Imagine that. That's not going to happen. Keep dreaming. Okay, so anyway, PHAs maintain EIV records for a period. Now we're into EIV record retention policy. See how we just transition real quick? So anyway, we talked about this earlier. EIV record retention, not to exceed a period of 3 years from the EOP date, or from the basically the duration of pending litigation, whichever in which the litigation began prior to the end of participation date. So if you had something pending litigation and then they subsequently moved out, you could maintain EIV beyond the 3 years as long as that litigation was still active. But the minute that there's a judgment or the case is closed, then you must end your retention of the EIV information. And then also, just note at the bottom there, 24 CFR Part 908-101 was a modified regulation with the refinement of income and rent rule, which specified that housing authorities are required to maintain at a minimum 3 years of the most recent 50058 and supporting documentation. And that's just, again, keep in mind, this is HUD's record retention policy. Keep in mind that your local or state laws may require you to maintain documents for a longer period of time. However, you cannot keep the EIV information longer than the 3 years. So if your state law requires 7-year record retention, the EIV information is the property of the federal government and must be destroyed within 3 years of the EOP date or when the litigation that's pending is finalized. Okay, EIV disclosure policy, and we mentioned this during the security awareness component of this training session, that your EIV information prohibits, or actually the Federal Privacy Act prohibits the redisclosure or disclosure of EIV information to individuals other than to the individual to whom the information pertains to, unless that individual has given written consent for the release of that information. What has also come up is, can legal aid have access to the tenant's file or EIV record? Yes, if the client has given written consent for that information. The Privacy Act does allow for an individual to review its record, and actually, if that individual chooses to have someone accompany him or her to review such records and make copies of those records, Privacy Act allows for that to occur. And do keep in mind that you, the PHA, you do have the authority to charge an administrative fee for copying of records. So you don't feel like you have, they're like, well, Dad, man, I need you to copy this. You're like, this is 156 pages. Who's going to pay for that? You are, client. So you do have the right to do that. EIV data of an adult household member may not be disclosed to any other adult members. Okay? But look on the next screen. Please note, you are not prohibited from discussing with the head of household how the actual income determination was made based on income information from all household members. However, what you cannot do, and I've kind of been out of the mix for a minute, but when I was at the Housing Authority, I would interview adult household members individually. But most people are used to bringing everybody in at the same time in the room. If you have an EIV income report, you cannot show or discuss the content of that report with anybody other than the individual it pertains to. Now, I do have good news. Coming April 2011, can you get excited? EIV will be modified so that you can print just the portion of the report that pertains to an individual. So we're going to modify EIV, and there's going to be a little printer-friendly icon next to each name, and then you can basically click and print just the portion of the report that you want to print out. And that'll come in handy for those of you that are doing your re-exams through the mail, and some of you all sending information packets to the individuals, but keep in mind, you cannot send a complete EIV income report to the head of household. That's an ultimate no-no. If that report contains information about other adult household members, you cannot send that report to the head of household. Also, EIV information may only be used for determining eligibility and level of assistance under a covered PIH rental assistance program. So if you are transmitting a 50058 to HUD, EIV information will automatically be available for those individuals provided that the SSNs are valid SSNs. However, you cannot share the EIV information, say, with your local child support office or social service office, or maybe there's some kind of other tax program or some kind of service that means, well, you cannot use the EIV information for anything other than eligibility and level of assistance for the public housing, housing choice voucher, project-based Section 8 programs that are under the PIH umbrella, okay? So if you got a 5.8, you got data. If an agency is asking for data, the notion is that, look, I can't give you this data. I know it will be valuable to you, but I cannot give it to you. It is not yours to give. It belongs to HHS. HHS says that this information can only be utilized for determining eligibility, level of assistance for PIH rental assistance programs. Continue on with the EIV disclosure policy. HUD is authorized under the Federal Privacy Act and in accordance with the provisions in HUD's computer matching agreement with HHS to disclose EIV data to you, the PHA, HUD OIG, as well as the Attorney General's Office. PHAs are authorized to disclose EIV data, again, in accordance with HUD's computer matching agreement with HHS and Social Security Administration, to individuals to whom the information pertains to. You're allowed to disclose it to a receiving housing authority under portability. Okay, and I think I got a special slide for you, Housing Choice Voucher Program, folks, because y'all are just wearing people out on that portability. It's like, can I get the EIV? You can't get this. Okay, check out the Section 8 regulations under portability. There's administration responsibilities, and one of those includes giving the receiving housing authority the 50058 and supporting documentation and related verifications. Related verification means EIV and any other verifications that are with that record, okay? Also, you're authorized to disclose to federal, state, or local court upon receipt of a court order, or AKA subpoena. If a court says they need files, you have to comply with the court order, okay? I don't want to find anybody, I don't want to see anybody on the front page. Ms. Faison told me not to disclose that EIV information, that's why I'm going to jail. No. Ms. Faison said if you get a court order in accordance with United States Privacy Act, Title 5 USC 552A as amended. It's a line item specifically for releasing information obtained through computer matching in accordance with a court order subpoena. You must, court order subpoena means you must do it. So I don't have any money to get you out of jail, so just go on and do what you're supposed to do, okay? All right. PHAs are also authorized to disclose EIV information to internal and external auditors. Okay, and that is for audit-related purposes only. And your auditors should be signing non-disclosure oath statements. That's a traditional practice when auditors come out and audit. They know they're going to be accessing certain information, and they are required to indicate the non-disclosure oath. Okay, and then lastly, lawyers, court personnel, and other agency personnel associated with either grievance or legal proceedings relating to independently verified information reported by EIV. And what that means in plain layman's terms, if your tenant didn't report their income and now they've gone and they want a grievance or they've taken you to court and they have pending litigation or pending grievance here, the people associated with the adjudication process may have access to printed copies hard copies of EIV information for the purposes of adjudication only. Okay? And I think, are we ready to take a break? We got about 5 minutes? Okay, let's take 5 minutes. I think we're going to wrap up this part here, and then we're going to break for about 15 minutes. But let me finish up this last little bit, and then for those of you that are out there watching via webcast, we're going to be breaking, and a screen will go up letting you know when we'll be back. But lastly but not least, EIV disclosure policy. Notify HUD in writing of all court-ordered subpoenas, requests for EIV information. HUD maintains documentation so that we can report out, if necessary, to HHS and Social Security Administration of any requested EIV information via subpoena. And you can send that information to PIH.RHIIP.TA@HUD.gov. And I had somebody, I want to say Tim and Tom Johnson up in New York. We were working on a case, and I appreciate you all reaching out to HUD to share that experience that you had regarding the court order subpoena. And so send those requests or documentation to the PIH-RHIIP.TA@HUD.gov. And also, this is the same email address that we provide EIV technical assistance on a daily basis to assist you. And then here's the slide that I mentioned earlier, the HTV portability administration by initial PHA, again reminding you that you're required to provide the EIV information. And there's the regulatory citation, because some of y'all, and this is what I tell you folks, when I train, I provide you with regulatory citations. I will tell you if something's regulatory required, here's the citation. Read it for yourself. Don't just take my word for it. I'm human. I make mistakes. My thing is, if there's a requirement on the books, I'm either pointing you to a regulatory requirements or PIH administrative guidance that's in writing, or a statutory provision that says you must do A, B, C, and D. And so please take that approach. If somebody tells you you have to do something and you don't understand why you have to do it, you need to understand if there's a regulatory or if there's a statutory or administrative requirement to do such thing. Now, we're going to break, and then we're going to get into how erroneous EIV information is corrected. So let's go take a 15-minute break and come back. And folks being webcast, we'll be back shortly. Thank you. Welcome back. Hopefully everyone has had a nice, enjoyable break. And we're getting geared up for the second segment of this training. And so let's go right into how incorrect information in EIV can be corrected. And one of the things I want to point out to you, EIV will never be a be-all to end-all type of system. And so do understand that sometimes data may be incorrect by no fault of the tenant, no fault of the PHA. So sometimes the originator or the source of the EIV information may make a little boo-boo when reporting out on information. These things happen. They're typically administrative errors. And so please understand, HUD cannot correct incorrect EIV information. The correction of the information has to come from the source or the provider of the information. And so over the next few slides, we'll show you the source of the EIV information, and you need to refer your tenant to the source of the information. Keep in mind, if your tenant doesn't follow up with the source, the information is going to continue to be reported about the family and EIV, which is going to make it an administrative burden to you because you're going to have to document why you're ignoring this EIV information every time it keeps showing up. So if you'll look at the next slide here, the source of employment and wage information, source is the employer. For unemployment information, it's the state workforce agency or the agency within your state that has the responsibility of paying out the unemployment compensation. For Social Security, very simplistic. The originator or source of Social Security benefit information is the Social Security Administration or SSA. And then the debts owed or adverse information reported about a former tenant is the PHA. If you report information about your tenant or former tenant, you are the originator or source of the information, and only you can correct that information. Now, I told you we were going to talk briefly about identity theft because in a lot of instances, some of your clients have found out as a result of you using EIV that they are the victim of identity theft. So seemingly incorrect EIV information can be an indicator that the person's Social Security number is being misused either intentionally or unintentionally, and they need to understand that SSA does not require you to report a lost or stolen Social Security number. However, tenants may call the Social Security on their toll-free number, which is listed at 1-800-772-1213. This number should be embedded in every Housing Authority staff person's mind that does reexaminations, because the toll-free 800 number for Social Security Administration is the number that you call for benefit verification letters. It's the number if you want to check out your earnings statements to make sure it's reflected correctly. And then you'll notice also here, continuing on with identity theft, that your client should be encouraged to file an identity theft complaint with the local police department and or the Federal Trade Commission, and you should request documentation, and that written documentation of filing these identity thefts in your tenant file folder will be evidence as to why you have not utilized the EIV information that's in there. And then we ask that tenants provide you, the PHAs, with that documentation. So there's also reference to the Federal Trade Commission website and toll-free number in which an identity theft complaint can be filed, and it can be done online or via the telephone. You'll actually find that their FTC's online identity theft complaint process is very simplistic. I've done it twice already. My identity has been stolen at least 2 or 3 times. Will the real Nicole Faison please stand up? Okay. Penalties for noncompliance with mandated EIV use. And again, it is not the department's intent to have to employ sanctions or disallowed costs as a result of not utilizing EIV. But for some of you housing authorities that have staff persons like Sally who doesn't want to be there and doesn't want to do the job, you may want to let Sally go so that you can avoid sanctions and any disallowed costs associated with not utilizing the EIV system or errors that may occur as a result of not utilizing the EIV system. And of course, with any type of sanction that would be presented to a housing authority, you would have the due process. We would let you know what the deficiency is and provide an opportunity for you to provide evidence that such deficiency does not exist, or there's a reasonable explanation for the deficiency. Now, do keep in mind, I have been working with improper payments on behalf of the department probably for the last, I guess, 5 years. But improper payments has kind of been stepped up to a new level under this new administration with the issuance of Executive Order 13520 that was signed by President Obama on November 20th, 2009, and published in the Federal Register on November 25th, 2009, which requires federal agencies as well as its stakeholders such as you, the PHAs, state, local entities that receive federal funding, to make sure that you are employing tactics that will reduce improper payments or monies paid on behalf of individuals who are not eligible for them, or amounts that are paid in higher amounts that really should be lower amounts of assistance. And at the end of the day, what this new administration as well as the former administration is concerned with, and you know, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, at the end of the day, we need to ensure that federal housing assistance programs are available and accessible by its intended program beneficiaries. And so with that in mind, HUD has created a team of folks that are here in this audience that are analyzing on a monthly basis various EIV reports, and we will be actually reaching out to housing authorities to provide technical assistance and guidance to ensure the effective implementation and utilization of these reports. And so it is our intent to be proactive versus reactive. And so sanctions for our group who is tasked with monitoring improper payments and identifying deficiencies, it is our core focus to provide technical assistance, training opportunities such as this, the PIH-RHIIP mailing list, the PIH-RHIIP mailbox, to open the lines of communication with you, the housing authorities, to be of service to you. Okay, so while you're servicing your clients, we HUD staff persons, we would like to service you and make sure that you are, going down the right track. And if you're going down the wrong track, we're going to help you get onto the right track. And so sanctions is really a last resort. Those sanctions are for agencies who just don't want to do anything. And there are not a whole lot of agencies out there like that. But do keep in mind, we will be out there to assist you, whether it's remotely or coming out to your housing authority. And this is an initiative sponsored by HUD headquarters. And we will be educating our local HUD offices about the various initiatives that we have coming up in this new fiscal year 2011, which starts October 1st, 2010. So PHAs may, of course, avoid penalties by following the HUD guidance. And if something's not clear, let us know so that we can clarify it for you. Training requirements, and this kind of touches on the questions asked earlier. Again, EIV system users are required to complete initial EIV system training, annual security awareness training, as well as updated EIV system training. So if you are an EIV system user and you never took like initial EIV training, which would have been like February 2009, you could make up for that and take the training tomorrow, not a big deal. The key is making sure you take the training. And the reason why HUD requires you to take HUD-sponsored EIV system training, whether it's initial EIV system training or updated EIV system training, we require you to do the HUD-sponsored training to ensure that you get the information correct. And it's not to say that third-party trainers are giving false information, but sometimes things get interpreted differently across the board. And so, literally, if you get it directly from the horse's mouth, you typically can't go wrong. So any misinterpretations can be dealt directly with HUD versus, well, when I went to this with Trainer Jane, she told me I had to do blah, 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 blah. So you're looking at HUD like, well, I was trained and they told me this way, but HUD goes by what HUD's way is. And so that's why third-party EIV system training does not meet the compliance of EIV, mandated EIV system training. So you're required to participate, view this webcast as an EIV system user to ensure that you get the information directly from HUD. So there are your three trainings: initial, updated EIV system training, as well as the annual security awareness training. And then we just talked about that. Only the HUD headquarters sponsored EIV system training is valid training for demonstrating compliance of mandated EIV system training. For annual security awareness training, you may participate in any third-party sponsored EIV system training, third-party annual security awareness training, even if it's sponsored by like your agency in-house. You may have an in-house training facility or what have you. That is acceptable. Third-party provided annual security awareness training is fine. Viewers and handlers of your EIVs, printed or electronic reports must have annual security awareness training. And then, of course, HUD offers these trainings via webcast. And, of course, we now do trainings so that PHAs are more than welcome to come in and, interact with HUD directly. So we facilitate that at least once a year. And on average, we do about 2 a year. The only reason we had 3 trainings this year is because we had a new regulatory requirement mandating EIV. So that's why we had that training in January. Typically, the trainings will be in April and September. The significance of those months is that those are the traditional months in which new versions of EIV is deployed. And again, our intent is to keep you informed of the changes to EIV system, educate you on the new functionality so that you can implement it successfully in your day-to-day operations. Also, despite what folks think, a certificate of completion tacked up on the wall is not necessary as evidence of completing EIV system training, and HUD offers certificates of completion as a courtesy service to you, because we do recognize that if you're going to spend 3 to 4 hours in training, you would like to have evidence of completed training, and so we offer that service as a courtesy to you, but it is not a requirement as condition for initial access or continued access to the system. As an EIV system user, when you log on to the system, you are certifying that you have completed the training, as I mentioned earlier. And then also, when you sign the HUD Form 52676, you're certifying that you have completed the training, and you will complete subsequent trainings. Now, on the note of certificate of completions, because I get a lot of emails about the certificates of completions, please understand that I am personally still processing your request for certificates for the January 28, 2010 training session. While we have sent out probably over 3,000 and some odd certificates, we probably have, as of this morning, there was 1,804 pending certificate requests. We will process your request. You will get your certificate if your submitted form is completed in accordance with the instructions. Please, 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 if you sent your certificate request form, and it has to come via email because it's the only way we accept it, if you did not get a failed delivery message from your email provider, I have your certificate request form. So please don't ask me to search through 1,800 certificate request forms to confirm that I have received your certificate request form. That takes a lot of time for me to do. In the grand scheme of things, I have 15 million things to do, and that's one less thing that's really not necessary for me to do. If you didn't get a failed delivery message, I got it. It's in our mailbox. Okay? Do not send me duplicates. Okay? That's why it's taking me so long to process the request. Some of you are sending your request form for the same 2 people 15 times. Okay? That slows the process down. Now, I will offer certificate of completion for this training session as well as tomorrow's training session. However, you will not be able to request those certificates until I have completed every last January 28th, 2010 certificate request form. If you have never, ever, ever sent in a January 28th certificate request form, you have until October 30th to send in your request form, okay? As I am processing your request forms, because what happens is I physically open up your email attachment and make sure that all the information is completed correctly. And once I've confirmed that, you will receive a confirmation email letting you know that I have processed your request and give you an anticipated delivery date. Now, if I sent you a message between January 28th and June 11th, letting you know that you were going to get your certificate by July 31st, those certificates are delayed. We ran out of paper, okay? And that parchment paper is very expensive, and I had to get special authority to order it. The paper has come in, and we're back to processing. We never stopped processing. We just couldn't print because we didn't have the print. We didn't have the paper to print on. You will get your certificate if you requested it. Please, no scanned, no mailed, no fax requests, because it's an automated process. It's a PDF form, a PDF filled document that is automatically populated into a mail merge that generates your certificate. So if you send me a scanned form, I'm going to have to let you know I can't process it. You have to send a PDF filled, otherwise I can't process. And again, the certificate is not a requirement. It is a courtesy for those of you that want to tack it up on the wall with a little thumbtack. Some of you all, a little more extravagant, you go to Neiman Marcus or Dillard's or Macy's and you get a lovely frame and you frame it on the wall. You will get your certificate, so please, your patience, your cooperation, and understanding is appreciated. Moving right along, training requirements. Notice here, training offered between October 1st and March 31st. Training must be completed by April 29th. Training that's offered April 1st through September 30th has to be completed by October 30th or a date later as specified by HUD. New employees who begin employment after March 31st have until October 30th to complete the training. However, new employees should not be accessing EIV until they have taken the required training, okay? So I know the first couple days on the job, you know, typically they're the most boring, but tell them you got a treat for them. You got EIV training for them, and just go tell them to sit in the room and watch the training. Because, you know, realistically, the first week, unless, you know, they're a seasoned, you know, occupancy specialist or housing manager or voucher specialist, you know, they got to go through the training anyway. So you might as well, you know, kill some time and have them do the training up front. Then your employees who begin employment after September 30th, they have until April 29th for the following year. This training, as I mentioned earlier, you have until April 29th, 2011 to complete the training. Okay? See how simple that is? And then this is just a little table to show you. I love this table. And I created this because a lot of folks didn't quite get what training an individual is required to have. So notice if you're a new EIV system user, you got to take all 3 trainings. If you're a current EIV user, guess what? You got to take all 3 trainings. See how simple that is? Annual security awareness, initial EIV system, updated EIV system training. And if you're an EIV data viewer or handler, all you have to do is take the annual security awareness training. However, if your agency is, you know, proactive in doing staff development and upward mobility programs, you may want to encourage that individual to take initial EIV system training as well as updated EIV system training so that they can learn something new and perhaps progress within your agency. All right, PIH Notice 2010-9, I love it, effective use of HUD's EIV Deceased Tenants Report to eliminate housing dead people. This was issued in response to an HUD OIG audit, and it was the audit report issued in November of 2009. It was the very first audit report issued in this fiscal year, and we issued the guidance on March 30th, 2010, and it basically is designed to help housing authorities ensure that they're submitting current and accurate PIC data, because one of the things that was outlined in the audit report is that housing authorities were not updating family composition on the 5/8, and so basically the 5/8 that was in PIC reflected inaccurate household composition. Also, the guidance is giving you assistance on how to avoid paying HAP in error on behalf of deceased single members, and then also how to recover improper payments made to landlords. So that's the extent of that notice. And PHAs are required, as I mentioned earlier, you're required to generate your deceased tenants report on a monthly basis. If you're running a housing choice voucher program, it's the end of the month. Guess what you should be doing? Running your deceased tenants report to make sure you don't cut a HAP check for somebody who's died in September, because the landlord is not entitled to HAP on October 1st. HAP stops when tenant is no longer with us, okay? Also, keep in mind, if you haven't seen the updated HAP contract, it was modified in April 2010. The HAP contract was modified, if I'm not mistaken, it's the paragraph on the right-hand side of the page down towards the middle. It's Section B, paragraph 4, and it's the very last bullet, which basically says that the landlord is not entitled to HAP for any month following the month in which the death occurred. So if this deceased person is gone, no HAP. Landlords don't like it, tell them to call HUD. Call me, not a problem. No HAP. I got to worry about how I'm going to get this stuff out the unit. That's between you and the local tenant landlord laws, and the housing authority has no dog in that fight. Okay? You cannot pay HAP. It's the end, okay? Very simple. Follow up immediately with the reported families with deceased household members. Now, some of you all are very creative and proactive, and so I'm going to send a letter. Dear John, it appears that you are no longer living. If this is not correct, please contact us immediately. Now, do keep in mind, don't fall for the okie doke, because poor Aunt Bessie, she died, and all the other family members that weren't on the lease, they're living in the unit, and so they may show up at the management office. Well, Aunt Bessie left this last will and testament, and you see in paragraph 7B, she left voucher number 2467922 to me. TBSSSS. I'm not going to tell you what that stands for, but if you've been following my acronyms over the years, you know what TBSSSS stands for. Don't say it, just think it. Too bad, so sad, so sorry. That voucher is not transferable. Secondly, they need to understand that as unauthorized occupants of the unit, you don't, again, if it's Section 8, there's no conversation, because the bottom line is they're not a part of family composition. You don't have to have any discussion, because what's there to talk about? And they might break out and tell you, well, Bonnie Rich said we had something to talk about. Let's give them something. There's nothing to talk about. I don't care what the song says. Bonnie Rich says she was talking about love, so I would love for you to leave my office, because I can't talk with you right now about this. So take the necessary corrective action. And the other okie doke, if you don't want to fall for on the public housing side, is somebody will show up and tell you that they're Aunt Bessie. I had this lady come in pretending to be Aunt Bessie. Now, if you know your tenants like I know my tenants, I'm like, that is not Aunt Bessie. Aunt Bessie didn't have no mustache. If you don't know your clients, just check. Can I have photo ID? And come on in. Not a problem. Just make sure you know who you're dealing with, okay? Don't fall for the okie doke. Now, your first priority is to see single-member households, okay? That's your first priority. PIH Notice 2010-3, and I'm just going to breeze through this because this notice came out in January, and if I'm not mistaken, it came out before the January 28th broadcast, but I put it in here because this focuses on verification of Social Security numbers as well as verifying SSA provided benefits. And this notice, again, was prior to January 28th, issued January 20th, and it is something we already discussed, but I want to reiterate because this notice outlines the required verification procedures of SSA benefits. But please note here, notice, and you might not be able to notice, but it's in red, do not, emphasis on not, contact or send applicants or tenants to the local SSA office for a benefit verification letter, okay? Instead, SSA wants all folks to utilize their automated processes to have benefit verification letters generated. This cuts down on the administrative costs to the federal government in generating these benefit verification letters. And again, here is referenced on the screen to the toll-free number at SSA and also the online web address for accessing the benefit verification letters. You can request it through these automated services. The client will be receiving their requested letter in the mail from SSA within 10 business days. Ask your client to bring that letter or mail it to you, or have, their friend, family member, assistant, aide, drop it off to you. If you do not follow the required HUD guidelines, SSA may charge you a fee. Okay? So, and let me give you a heads up. SSA notifies me in writing on a daily basis of any housing authority who has contacted them with manual requests for benefit verification letters, or tenants who have been sent in to get a benefit verification letter for housing benefit purposes, okay? And when they notify me of those individuals and entities not complying with the HUD required verification procedures, I have to give you a phone call or I have to send you an email. I don't want to do it, but I have to let you know that you have to follow the HUD procedures outlined in this PIH notice, and I will ask you to refrain from sending emails, making phone calls, faxing, mailing, verification, third-party verification forms to the local SSA office to fill out, or sending clients. Please utilize the automated services. Again, we're service providers, so if you have clients that are challenged, you know, Aunt Flossie comes in all the time and she tells me, you know, Nicole, this arthritis, I can't really dial the numbers. Not a problem, Aunt Flossie. I will dial the number for you. You can let her speak it, or you know, if you do re-exams through the mails and you know that you have an elderly disabled client that may need assistance, you may want to put a release in the folder that says basically you authorize the housing authority to call the 800 number to request the information on their behalf, and then just do it for them. So there are options, but do please, I don't make these rules up. This verification procedure is geared to minimize manual requests for verifications on behalf of the SSA office. So please follow this policy. Now we're moving on to the new form 52676. This is the EIV access authorization form and rules of behavior and user agreement. It now has an OMB number and a current date issued by OMB. So anytime you see an OMB number, that means you are required to complete the form in accordance with the instructions provided with the form. That's the OMB control number 25770267. It's including, please keep in mind, this form is also applicable to individuals who will view and handle EIV information. Notice that on the form, and there's a form in your packet, and also if you're watching this, there's a handout with the form as an attachment. And if they're just a viewer or handler, they're just going to put their name and their, you know, agency information and check the box that they're a viewer. They don't need to proceed to Section B of the report because they're not accessing the system. Anything past the first page is for system users, but they do have to read the rules of behaviors, which outlines the physical, administrative, and technical safeguards that they should be cognizant of and aware of, and they have to sign the form as well. Prior versions of this form are obsolete, so everybody must have this new form 52676 on hand. We announced this form on, I believe it was May 24th. The EIV web pages were updated, and I believe we sent out a message, and we're asking that folks try to, you know, if you haven't already done it, complete the form and send it to your local HUD office. But I'll be working with the local HUD field offices to coordinate this process. So HUD field offices, I'll be reaching out to you because the intent is not to inundate you. I know everybody's sending their forms in to the local field offices, and they're trying to figure out, well, which ones are the new access requests, or are these just, you know, people who already have access? So we'll work through it. That form gets submitted to the EIV coordinator in your local HUD field office. Also, as a part of the attachments, you have an EIV coordinators list. These are the designated coordinators in your local HUD office that should be receiving the forms. These are also your frontline staff persons who will provide you with technical assistance and guidance. And if they're unable to assist you, they'll reach out to me, or they'll reach out to me with you on the email, and we'll work through it together, okay? And then please, this goes back to what I mentioned to you earlier. I know a lot of times we just don't want to read. While the form is self-explanatory, there are detailed instructions as to how to fill out the form, what box you should be checking if you check this box in Section A, and what to check in Section B. So please read the instructions. And then existing EIV users, most of you are like, well, which box do I check? Because I'm not a new user. While you're not a new user, since this is a new form, just check number 1, new user. Everybody basically is checking that they're a new user. This is the form that will be on file for you. And later on, if you modify your access, then you'll, you know, check, you know, the modification box, and then just check the roles that you're adding or removing or what have you. Okay, I love this new form. Form number 52675, it's the debts owed to PHAs and Terminations, notice to applicants and tenants. Again, this form is required because it has an OMB number, and the OMB number is 2577-0266. They were approved right around the same time that the EIV access authorization form was approved. And PHAs are required now to report to HUD any family who has left the program on bad terms and or owes a debt. And this is kind of leading up to the debts owed module on how to use it. The content of this new form is designed to, again, educate your applicants and your tenants that HUD collects information from housing authorities with respect to outstanding debts owed and any adverse status as of end of participation date. And again, this is geared towards the new improper payments initiative under President Obama and making sure that the program is accessible by intended program beneficiaries. Now, unfortunately, there are some tenants who are in our program that should not be in our program. There are some tenants who will leave our program who should never come back to our program. So the key here is to alert the PHA community of these individuals so that you can make an informed decision. So we're telling them, hey, we collect this information. We tell them who will have access to the information, how the information is going to be utilized, how long the data is going to be maintained about them, as well as their rights as a tenant or former tenant. And since this is considered adverse information, they have certain rights. One of the things you should be aware of is that this whole debts owed to PHAs and termination is actually written in the context similar to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which basically affords individuals an opportunity to be aware that information is being reported about them that's adverse, that may impact them, and how to deal with this information that's being reported. And then we tell them how to dispute the information. So this document is for all applicants and tenants who are 18 and over. They're required. Notice the operative word, required. Not a problem if you don't want to sign the form, Becky. Not a problem. We just can no longer process your application. This is a HUD required form. No sign, no process application. Hey, we got a lot of applications. You got to make it easy on yourself. Now, it's no problem if you don't want to sign. Because I'm going to keep it moving on to the next application. All right. Sally, girl, I'm on application number 9,956. Which one you on? Number 2. Sally don't want to process any applications. But I assure you, Sally is going to love this form because she's like, shoot, that's less I have to do. I have to process this out. You don't want to sign? Next! All right. I think Sally's going to start liking her job, don't you? So the form, you got to keep it in the tenant file or applicant file. And if the applicant becomes a participant, that form stays in the file for the duration of tenancy. They only have to sign the form one time. Okay? If you have tenants who have left the program between June 2008 up to now, and you're going to be reporting information into the debts owed about them, you will need to mail a copy of the 52675 to the last known address for that family. If they didn't leave a foreign address and the last known address you had was the unit that, that was being subsidized, or it was a public housing unit address, just send it to 123 Main Street, whatever the address is, mail it. If it comes back, just put it in the file. You have done your job, which is to mail it to the last known. They can't say, I wasn't notified. We attempted to notify you, but again, we want to alert and keep families aware of There's going to be no longer the notion of you doing bad over here at the Topeka, Kansas Housing Authority, and then you show up to Washington, D.C. talking about, hi, I want to get on your voucher program. I think it's the voucher program. Is that the program yet? They act like they don't know nothing about the program. I never heard of that program. They know good and well they know all about the program. They probably wrote some of the regulations, but they're not going to tell you that. But nonetheless, mail to the last known address, because guess what? They're soon going to learn that you cannot do bad over here at this housing authority and then show up at the next housing authority, okay? Are you getting excited? Because we're getting ready to get into that debts owed module. I can't wait to talk about that. Now, check this out. Now, if this isn't fair, I don't know what is. The family has 3 years from the EOP date to dispute any adverse information you report about them. 3 years. Anybody know why HUD chose 3 years? Why 3 years? Exactly. That's HUD's record retention requirement. After 3 years, y'all can toss that stuff, shred it, burn it, have a bonfire. We already know what Sally gonna do, right? 3 years. Come on, y'all. She's burning up stuff. But 3 years record retention policy. So after 3 years of the EOP date, and notice the last bullet. If Mary doesn't come forward and say, hey, I dispute this information you reported on me, Topeka, Kansas. TBSSSS. 3 years is up. The information is presumed correct. There's nothing you can do after 3 years. And 3 years, that's a long time. So let's keep it moving on to how to use EIV's debts owed to PHAs and termination module. I am getting so excited because, and you know what, I can't even enter debt information into, but I love looking at them reports because I'm gearing up for my new TV show. So the new system functions in here allow for you to search for a former tenant. And basically, this is what you should be checking out before you admit somebody into the program. I'm going to show you that in a minute. You also have the ability to enter, update, and delete information for families. And then you have the ability to generate a report for your agency so you can kind of get a sense of, well, gee, how many families have left my program with adverse status or owe us money? You can actually see that at an agency level for your housing authority. And this is available. This is a new, it's not new, but it's new. We deployed this new module in EIV on September 25th, 2009, almost a year ago from today. And you PHAs, you asked for this, and HUD created it. You said, I want a national repository of debts owed and termination information so I can make an informed decision, because we all have to face it. You know, within your areas and within your region, yeah, a lot of housing authority staff, you know people at different housing authorities, but there's no way on earth that you could be calling the local housing authorities up every day saying, hey, I got this application pending. Do you know anything about this? You don't have time for that. So we have automated the process, which relies on you, the PHAs, reporting out information on debts owed by any individual who has left the program. And if they've left the program under negative circumstances, then we want to know about it. If you had somebody who just didn't know how to keep house and the house was dirty on the public housing side, you know, they might not be a candidate for a voucher, because if you can't keep the public housing unit clean, you're not going to keep the landlord's house clean, and then, you know, your landlord's going to be mad with you because they think that you're supposed to do the screening of the tenants on the Section 8, but you need to refer them back to the 24 CFR 982, which tells them screening of the tenants is the landlord's responsibility. But nonetheless, EIV is going to be importing from PIC your end of participation families on a daily basis. Only 50058s dated within the last 15 months are going to be imported into EIV. Now, for my folks out in Arizona, particularly Phoenix, and I'm sorry, Mark, but I wish I could let you import EOPs from way, way back when. Mark got about 500 clients that he would love to report out on, but they left the program prior to June 08. HUD made the determination that in all fairness to families who left the program, they had no idea that this was coming. So we figure June 2008, that was 15 months from September of 2009, that was going to be the cutoff. So anybody who left the program prior to June 2008, they got a free pass. But let me say this. Sometimes you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So history has a way of repeating itself. So if they cheated or they did something bad over here, unless that client has found some type of religion or, gotten into yoga and meditation and getting in tune with themselves and doing good for the whole community and all that, I assure you, they will show up again and they will do wrong. Unfortunately, you might have to be the one to report them out, but it won't happen again, I assure you that. Okay? But that's what I'm saying. Just make sure you understand. June 2008, no, HUD's not going to populate 5/8 from before that time. You can't enter, because most people say, oh, well, I just go in EIV and I just punch in the Social Security number and add it. You can't add records to EIV. EIV automatically populates EOP records from PIC. Effective April 26th, and I mentioned this, PHAs are required to report basically out on the adverse status of a family who's left the program. Only housing authorities may enter the information. HUD does not have the ability to enter or correct information that you have entered. We put that in place because I'm going to tell you right now, some of your clients, they do call here into Washington. Ms. Faison, I don't know why they put me in this debts owed module. I don't know. Why do they call me? Because I'm like the last person they should be calling, because I have very little empathy for folks who have left the program on bad terms, because as a former PHA staff person, I know that I have a waiting list of 13,000 families, and there's a 50-50 chance that the next family that I pull in is going to do what they're supposed to do. So nonetheless, your clients call into Washington, and so nobody can call in here and say, oh, well, could you update my debts owed record? I sure can't. I'm going to refer them right back to you, the housing authority, okay? Now, people get kind of fascinated with the word termination, and folks are like, well, I did not terminate them. They left the program. So I want to clarify for you, the term termination means the family either voluntarily or involuntarily left the program. What we're trying to capture is, as of the EOP date, there was some type of adverse status that needs to be reported on. Either they left and they didn't owe us a penny, great, but they have problems complying with the program. They didn't do the annual reexamination. They had criminal activity. They were a sex offender. Whatever the reason is, whatever the adverse status is, we want to alert the PHA community. And so termination does not mean that you physically evicted them or you physically terminated housing assistance payments under the voucher program. It's just simply termination means they're no longer participating in the program for whatever reason. Information is entered into EIV by you, the PHA. Notice what we're asking you to enter, and please keep in mind, you should not be entering any information into the debts owed module until 30 days after the EOP date. That 30-day window is the 30-day notice period for the family, okay? So we're asking, do not enter information any sooner than 30 days from the EOP date. But in all fairness to your fellow PHAs, they want to know what's going on with your former tenants. So we're asking that you try to put this information in within, within 90 days from the 30 days notice period. And that will ensure that everybody's getting access to the information. But have no fear. Guess what's coming in April 2011? I'm so excited. Because I already know a lot of you are out there, you're like, well, what if the housing authority didn't put information in just yet, and I run them through the former tenant search, and there's no record coming up for their family, so I go in and I admit them into the program. So I wouldn't have known that there was a problem, because at the time of admission, I checked and there was no record. Well, guess what? Once that record is entered, and once that new person is admitted into the program, that EIV system, boy, it's gonna get you every time. Because guess what's going to happen? When that housing authority who just admitted that family goes to pull an EIV report the next go-around, if there's a debt record or adverse status reported, on the EIV report, there's going to be a big red alert. Warning! And a red flag jumping out. Warning! This person has a reported debt or adverse status. And then the PHA knows, hey, let me punch into social and see that record. Now, keep in mind, as of right now, the way the regulations are written, housing authorities have the discretion to terminate or deny assistance based on the fact that a family owes another PHA money, discretionary. Now, I haven't quite found any housing authority yet that will actually admit somebody into a program who owes $25,000 to Cedar Rapids Housing Authority. But there are extenuating circumstances. Now, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. Keep in mind, people are like, well, why we got to do this? The purpose is for collecting information to share with the PHA communities, again, so you can make an informed decision and be aware of any outstanding debt that is owed to the housing authority. And this repository is going to help you to make an informed decision. So if you have the choice between admitting somebody who owes $25,000 and somebody who owes $0, which one are you going to take? You know, I always say, do unto others as you want done unto you. Sally, this is to you. Sally, the disgruntled housing authority worker, please, please, please enter the debt information. I know you don't want to do it, but please enter the information, because I don't want your headache, okay? A lot of times, the bad tenant will go from one housing authority to another housing authority. And see, some of y'all, see, I'm not going to point anybody out in the room, but if somebody in here guilty, you can't wait for your client. Ms. Faison, I would like to port out. Here you go. Port. Bye-bye. I'm so glad. I'm trying to get rid of her. Tired of dealing with it. If you got problems with your tenant, you need to address them. Don't send your problem tenants to the next PHA. Why you think they want to deal with your headache? Some of y'all got Excedrin right on your desk, and you're just like, oh, boy. And then you need Calgon when you get home to take you away. So your PHA executive director has to basically make a determination who at your agency is going to enter all this lovely information. Current EIV system users, if you have any occupancy specialist role, you will automatically be able to search the former tenant module to find anybody who may owe a debt. You also will be able to view the debts owed to PHAs and termination report for your agency. However, most of you are like, Nicole, I am dying to enter this information. Y'all are so psyched. Y'all are to be commended, because you just like, I'm ready to put this data in. I can't see how to put the data in there. I told you in September '09 when the system was released, you have to have the special role. And those roles are called Program Administrator, Public Housing, Program Administrator, Voucher. And they're self-explanatory. If you have the Public Housing Program Administrator role, you can enter data for public housing. If you have the voucher, you enter it for the voucher. The PHA User Administrator basically has to go into EIV system and select to add that new role to your user ID, and then that has to be approved by the EIV coordinator in your local HUD office, and they will approve such role when you send in your 52676 that is signed authorizing you to have access to this role. And notice here on the screen, this is one of our users, and y'all know who that is? DC knows who that is. Okay, so right, notice here, that's your program administrator role, those last two boxes. Notice there's no check mark in there, so you have to put a check mark in there in order to request the role to be added. And when you check that checkbox and click on update, then the status and notice here there's a status, it will say pending. And in order for it to change from pending to approve, your local HUD office has to approve it, okay? And the status will change to approve once your local HUD office clicks on the approve button within EIV. And your program administrator needs to understand there are certain responsibilities that you have with this program administrator role. And they're very simple. You're going to delete families from the master list of EOPs where there's no adverse information to report on the family, or you're going to enter debt information and adverse status as of the EOP date. Those are basically the two things. Either you're deleting or you're adding data. But there is an integrity component of this program administrator role, and that's ensuring that the data that you enter is complete and accurate. So if you're not quite sure about the information that you're putting into the system, don't enter it into the system, okay? Because you have to make sure that it's accurate. And upon notice of any inaccurate information, you are responsible for correcting or deleting that information. Now, let me show you how to do the search for former tenant information. Prior to admission, housing authorities are required to run each adult household member in the former tenant search. You're basically doing a query against the master repository, and you will maintain a copy of the search results from that query. So to search for a former tenant is very simple. You'll double-click on the search for former tenant link, enter the 9-digit Social Security number. You'll notice here on the screen all of your functions in EIV on the left navigation panel. You'll simply click on the search for former tenant, enter in the Social Security number, and click Get Information. And then the system is going to display either a negative or positive result. And then there's a result that I kind of call a neutral result, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. But the negative result means that a PHA has not entered any information into the system for that particular family. A positive result means the opposite. Unfortunately, there is some reported information that needs to be made aware to you so that you can make an informed decision. And so this is what a negative results for former tenant looks like. And notice that it's just a simple screenshot that shows no search, no records found for SSN ending in. It'll display the last 4 digits only of the SSN that you search. So this is how HUD can determine whether or not you are doing the search, because we're going to look at the Social Security numbers on the application, and if we see 1, 2, 3, 4, but we don't see 1, 2, 3, 4 on this report, then we know you didn't run that family. Okay? On the flip side, here's a positive result, and this is tenant Obuzu that owes San Mateo Housing Authority $25,000 for failure to pay rent, failure to pay other charges, failure to pay retroactive rent. Okay, this is the top portion of the report. The bottom portion of the report basically is a notice to your client letting them know what their rights are and what they can do about this information. Of course, if you have that positive result here, then what you want to do is give your client, the applicant, a copy of that report. And again, in accordance with your housing authority's policy, you most likely are not going to admit that family into the program based on this adverse information. You have to adhere to your agency's policy, so you would deny admission based on your agency's policy. HUD's regulation says you may, so that means you have discretion. You may deny, you may terminate assistance based on the fact that they owe money or have demonstrated inability to comply with program requirements in the past. And again, the tenant has to discuss this information with the reporting housing authority. There's no point in you wasting your time going back and forth with the client about this information. This information is presumed correct unless the tenant disputes within 3 years of the EOP date. But again, any disputes of the information has to be with the reporting housing authority. So you're wasting your time if you're going to go back and forth with the client. Just let them know, you know, I'm sorry, but I cannot resolve this issue with you. You have to work with the reporting agency, okay? Look at the last bullet. PHA who has denied assistance is required to provide the family with the household debt owed to PHA and termination report. So if you have denied assistance, and one of the things you probably want to get in the habit of doing is, if you're denying an application for assistance based on an EIV debt record, include a copy of that record in the denial letter. And that way they don't have to come back to you and ask for a copy of the report. The report lists all the household members that were a part of the family as of the EOP, and they can resolve that issue with the reporting housing authority. Now, do keep in mind, let's say hypothetically someone is on the debt service report and maybe they remember number 3, but they had nothing to do with the adverse action. It could have been that that individual was a minor at the time. You can, and one of the things I always tell housing authorities, there's no such thing as a cookie cutter. You can't say that, oh, I'm going to deny for everybody across the board. Sometimes there are situations and circumstances that are not readily explainable by this report. And so it may be that that individual was not even a culpable member of the adverse action that was taken against the family. And so if you can get information that gives you the warm and fuzzy that, hey, this member, by golly, they were 5 when this happened. They couldn't have been a culpable member. They weren't working. You know, there's no contribution to this adverse. Then, you know, again, this is not hard and fast. Okay, if they're on the report, no admission. You can't do that. You can, but it can be problematic for you. But I'm just trying to let you know you have to be cognizant of certain situations, okay? And then also, the report does have the PHA's name, address, and telephone numbers as reflected in PIC. So do keep in mind that if information has changed as far as contact information for your housing authority, make sure you update PIC, because that is the information that's going to be conveyed to the individuals who are impacted by the debt service report. Now I want to show you how to enter and update tenant information. The debt owed termination information is available only if you enter the data. No data, no report is basically what it boils down to. So if you're a program administrator, you'll click on the Enter Update Information link. This will be the lovely notice screen that will be displayed, letting you know you're getting ready to enter debt information. You're going to certify that you're going to ensure that you enter complete and accurate information. It also tells you that a record should not be or cannot be modified more than 3 times. And then, if applicable, you're going to enter the following information: the amount owed, anywhere from 1 penny to 500,000. Hopefully, nobody owes you more than $500,000. We put a cap on the 500,000, the 500,000 level, because we want to make sure that there weren't any data entry errors. And I can tell you, I'm the first one. I am guilty. Data entry can be really boring, and I have fallen asleep, and my finger was on the 9999999. Nobody owes 9 trillion billion gazillion dollars. So the system is set up so that you can't enter anything greater than $500,000, okay? If you try, and please, can I tell y'all something? Because see, some of y'all, you think you can out-slick the system. And I'm here to tell you, you can't out-slick the slicker, okay? The system is not going to allow you to do certain things. Because Sally's like, I'm going in and put $567,000 on there. The system is not going to allow you to do that. And I'm going to show you some of the error messages. Because see, some of y'all, you say, well, I'm not even going to click the submit button. I'm just going to try and do it. And then if I can't do it, I'm just going to send HUD a snapshot before I got the error message, and they won't know what I was doing. I know exactly what you did, even if you don't send me a screenshot in this debt's owed, because people have been sending me messages about, I can't enter this debt amount. Yeah, because you didn't enter a dollar amount owed. If they owe you money, that means you got to put in a dollar amount. But nonetheless, you must select at least one failure to pay reason if you're entering a debt amount owed. If they owe you money, it's because they failed to pay. They did not pay you, so they owe you money. How are you? Let's think about this logically, and I'm going to walk you through this. How are you going to put debt owed $25,000, and then you're going to select an EOP status reason of sex offender? How do you owe money if you're a sex offender? You had to fail to pay something. Either you failed to pay rent, either you failed to pay retro rent, or you failed to pay some other charge. Now, we can get into all kinds of failure to pays, but we're going to keep it stupid simple. KISS, okay? Failed to pay, 3 categories: rent, retro, other. And if it's not rent and it's not retro rent, then other is what it goes into, okay? And notice here, if applicable, you're going to enter the following information: bankruptcy indicator. You'll check this box if you have received documentation that somebody has filed Chapter 7 or Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And let me tell you the significance of a bankruptcy filing, because I don't want anybody to get in trouble. Once you are officially notified of a bankruptcy filing, you are listed as a creditor, or whatever they want to categorize, because you're really not a creditor. But if they list you as they owe you money, the minute you're notified of bankruptcy filing, you must cease and desist from any collection efforts, or you can be sued, and you will lose, because the bankruptcy law says once you are notified, you have to stop all collection efforts. And so we want to have in our database, if you know that they filed bankruptcy, please check the bankruptcy box, because that alerts folks, hey, this person filed bankruptcy. Now, some folks exploit the bankruptcy filing process. I know a lady that files bankruptcy every 10 years. She's like, yeah, girl, because I'm going out here, I'm getting all this, I'm getting new cars and clothes and house and everything, and then I'm not going to pay, and then I'm going to file bankruptcy, get it all wiped out. Because unfortunately, Credit America, they so simple that after you done filed bank, this lady, if I was the bank president of Chase Morgan or Citibank or whatever, I would have that lady on my hit list, because I'm like, we're not giving you no credit. But the credit card companies, after 3 years, after you file bankruptcy, 3 years from the bankruptcy filing, then they start giving you little lines of credit. Okay, we give you $1,000. Here you go. Next thing you know, she demonstrates her ability to pay for the next 3 years, and then they give her a $25,000 line of credit, and guess what? 2 more years, she can ready to file bankruptcy, wipe it all out. So we want to know about bankruptcy. Also, if your folks have entered into a repayment agreement, or if they have defaulted on a repayment agreement, we want to know about it. And then, of course, your EOP status is selecting the applicable reasons of what was the problem as of the EOP date. And information will become a part of the repository once you click the submit button. And here's how you enter information. And do keep in mind, we are doing a complete overhaul of the debts owed module to make it even. Because right now it's not as easy as it could be. So April 2011, you will see a completely new debts owed module with various components to dissect by housing choice voucher, public housing. You'll be able to enter information for one Social Security number by searching for a Social Security number, multiple record deletions simultaneously, all kinds of good stuff. But this is how you enter. You simply click on the enter information. Nobody has to read the manual to do this, okay? It's self-explanatory. I tell people, go into the system, take a look at it. You'll see that you don't have to read. What do I do here? Enter or delete? I want to enter. So I click enter. And then this screen appears and allows for me to enter information. Okay, debt owed. I know this is where I put how much is owed to me as of the EOP date. And then notice your repayment agreement, default on repayment agreement is, boxes are there. Notice that the default on repayment agreement is grayed out. That is a technical mechanism to keep you from being checkbox happy, because some of you all are checkbox happy. People don't read, checkbox, yes, yes, yes. No, no, no. EIV is not going to let you check the default on repayment agreement box unless you have checked the repayment agreement box. Because in order for you to be in default of a repayment, duh, HUD spelled backwards, you have to check the repayment agreement, okay? See how simple that is? And then, of course, if you want to select multiple reasons from the selection menu here, it tells you what to do. Again, some of y'all are not reading. Please read what the screen is telling you. There's no reason why anybody should be asking HUD, how do I select multiple reasons? It tells you right there. Hold down Control to select multiple. Hold down the Control and clickety-clickety-click. Remember what I said? If you click it, you get it. Okay? Then to add it to the repository, click on the Submit button. Now, I want y'all to pay attention to this because I've never shown you these before. This is going to help you to avoid having to ask HUD. These are error messages you will get. Now, this is the common one. You must select a failure to pay reason. Basically, if you are trying to enter a debt owed, and this is the classic one, again, as I said earlier, if you're a sex offender, how do you owe money? I don't know. You have to select a failure to pay EOP status in order to add the debt. The next one, you must enter debt owed amount. If you enter or try to enter a transaction, here you're like, okay, you selected a failure to pay reason, but you haven't entered a dollar amount. So it works both ways. You have to enter a dollar amount and you have to enter a failure to pay reason, at least one. Okay, the next one, end of participation status is required. You can't add anything to the repository unless you select a reason. So you just basically can't add a record into the database unless you're selecting what the adverse status is. Remember, the point of this data collection is to report on adverse status. Okay, this is another one. Bankruptcy can only be checked when debt owed is greater than 0. Again, this is another mechanism in EIV to prevent you from checking boxes just to be checking them. So bankruptcy filing is irrelevant unless they owe you an amount. So you can't check the bankruptcy box unless you put in a dollar amount. Okay, updating former tenant information. Ensure, again, that the information is correct. You can modify the records only 3 times. However, HUD will modify this if it deems it necessary to modify a record more than 3 times. Now, this is a good one. If a former tenant is on a repayment agreement, we do not want you going into EIV and updating to reflect, okay, Mary owes me $5,000 as of EOP status date, EOP date. She's paying $5 a month. I don't want you going in there and updating. Now she owes me $4,995. You will be forever changing the record. The intent is to capture the status as of the end of participation date. If they're on a repayment agreement, you will check the repayment agreement box, and that lets the PHA community know they're on a repayment agreement. Okay? So do not make those types of modifications. To correct previously entered information, all you're going to do is click on the Edit button. Okay? And then edit the applicable information that you need to change. And again, you don't have to read the user's manual. Okay, I want to, and your choices are very simple. Either edit or delete. If your options are edit or delete, that means you have already entered information. If your options are enter information and delete, that means that's a record waiting for you to either delete it or enter information. Now, let me forewarn you, because this keeps happening. The deletion function is a permanent deletion. The system asks you, are you sure you want to delete the record? Now, some of us are very clicker happy with that mouse. Clickety, clickety, click, delete, delete, delete. But it's asking you before it deletes it, do you want to delete? And you're just saying yes, 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 okay? So many of you have inadvertently deleted records, and you're like, can I get the record back? No. Now, if it was September 2009, yeah, you would have been able to get the record back because we had a little boo-boo in EIV that EIV was repopulating the records once they were deleted. That was back in September of 2009. But I told you we would fix it with the April 2010 release, which we did fix. And so now when you permanently delete, it's gone for good and you can't get it back. And don't try to manipulate PIC. They're like, oh, well, I'll just delete that EOP that I sent and then I'll submit a new EOP. It's not going to happen, okay? It's not going to work, so don't try. I'm just telling you now. When you click on the delete link, you will be prompted to confirm your deletion. Now, I am adding a new enhancement in the system. It's going to ask you twice to confirm, but I'm actually exploring a possibility for September 2011 to put the deleted families in a recycle bin, which can be rejuvenated by the user administrator or program administrator for putting back in. So, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Please note, if you do not delete a family off the EOP listing or enter information, EIV will display a blank debt adverse record. And I want to show you what it looks like in just a minute. But keep in mind, you should do one of the following with a record that's listed on the EOP list. Either you're deleting it because there's nothing adverse to report, or you're entering information into the system about that family that's adverse. This is what a delete or a blank debt adverse record looks like. And keep in mind, look in the blue box here. All that information is basically zero debt reported, and the participation status is blank, and everything is no. That's because nothing has been entered. So you will automatically, because people are saying, hey, I'm doing the former tenant search and I'm getting this record. This record lets you know that the housing authority has not yet either deleted or entered information for that family. Okay, so there's a 50-50 chance that you might have a bad seed sitting in front of you trying to get into your program. But you won't know until the PHA either deletes or enters the information for that family. And of course, deleting, very simple, you click delete. See how easy that is? And then this is the last component, generating your debts owed to PHAs and termination report. This report basically includes your statistics for your housing authority as to how many adverse records there are, how many reported debts owed, and you'll simply click on the link associated with the household if you want to see the details. This is what your report looks like. Your top portion is the high-level statistics for your agency. The bottom portion is the tenant information or former tenant information being reported. So that is, my friends, the debts owed and PHAs and terminations. So what I want to do now is kind of facilitate some questions. And actually, we're actually going to have to wrap it up. But for our live studio audience, feel free to stay with me and chat. If you're watching this webcast, please direct your email inquiries to pih.rhip.ta@hud.gov. I want to thank you all for coming out and watching the show. For those of you that are here live, thank you for coming out. We've got people from Texas, Puerto Rico, and all over across the country. So I hope you enjoyed this EIV training session. And this is Nicole Faison signing off in Washington, D.C., September 23rd, 2010. Thank you so much. For those of you that are here, and we did not have a packet for you, or your name wasn't on the list, make sure if you're going to be here tomorrow,